Inside the villa, cold as a glass cage, my daughter-in-law placed each pill onto a white porcelain dish. "Did you forget again, Dad?" She smiled. "You signed the papers transferring everything to the research fund." My head felt heavy, my memories tearing apart like fog. But at dawn, the housekeeper quietly placed a used medication patch before me and whispered, "A real caregiver never hides medicine in the dark." In that moment, I knew my son had brought a demon into our home. Before we go any further, I'd like you to drop a quick comment for me. Is it morning, afternoon, or late night where you are? Your thoughts and presence here truly mean more than you might realize. Quick note, some details in this story have been fictionalized for storytelling and reflection. What matters most is the lesson it carries. The pills were arranged by size, then by color, then by time of day, a system so precise it made my investigator's instincts scream that something was wrong. I sat in the glass-walled living room of my Lake Geneva villa watching Lyora Ashford, my daughter-in-law 36, move through the kitchen in a gray cardigan and soft slippers. Her voice was gentle, her movements measured as she explained each medication's purpose. A performance so perfectly executed it made the instincts I'd developed over 3 decades as a forensic auditor wake from their 3-year retirement sleep. "I've arranged everything by the neurologist's schedule, Sterling," she said, setting the pill organizer on the glass coffee table. Winter fog pressed against the windows, turning Lake Geneva into a gray void. The blue one first, then 20 minutes later the white capsule. She was right, of course. She was always right. That was the first problem. At 71, with early-stage Alzheimer's making my short-term memory unreliable, I should have been grateful. My son Rowan had married her 2 years ago, and she'd insisted on moving into the villa to help manage my care when the diagnosis progressed. A loving gesture from a dutiful daughter-in-law. But in 3 decades of fraud investigation, I'd learned one thing. The best liars are the ones who never miss a detail. "You must be so relieved," Lyora continued arranging the pills on a white ceramic dish, "to have someone taking care of all this complexity for you." Her hands didn't tremble. That was what bothered me. Most people's hands shake slightly when handling medication for someone else. Uncertainty about dosage, fear of making a mistake. Lyora's fingers moved with the confidence of a surgical nurse. Prior practice. Lots of it. I took the blue pill, swallowed it with water from the glass she'd positioned exactly 6 inches from my right hand. She checked her watch, made a note on a small pad. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything," she said. "The glass walls carry sound beautifully." Yes, the glass walls. My architect had designed this place as a retirement dream, transparency, light connection to nature. Now it felt like living in an aquarium where every movement was visible. After she left, I sat watching the fog. How many fraud cases had I solved by noticing what was too perfect, too convenient, too clean? 17 major cases where the bookkeeping was flawless. 23 where the concerned accountant volunteered information without being asked. 41 where someone insisted on managing every detail because the victim was too confused to handle it themselves. The medication kicked in around 10. Heaviness in my limbs, fuzziness at the edges of my vision. Normal, according to the neurologist. Side effects would diminish after 2 weeks. But I'd been taking these pills for 3 months now. I waited until Lyora was occupied with laundry, then climbed the stairs to my small office, the only room truly mine. Oak desk from my old office, filing cabinets containing 30 years of case files, leather chair that still smelled like my late wife's cologne. The bank statement sat in my inbox. November's statement. I opened it with the careful attention I'd once applied to forensic documents. My retirement account, $3,460,000, down from $3.8 million last month. $340,000, gone in a single transaction dated October 23rd. The description read, "Voluntary medical donation, patient authorization required." My authorization. I found the scanned signature page attached. There it was, my signature. Sterling Garrison, written in the careful cursive my father had taught me, the capital G with its distinctive downstroke. The slight compression of the middle letters where I always rushed, the final N with the small tremor that had appeared 3 years ago with the diagnosis. Every detail was mine. I've examined 10,000 fraudulent signatures in my career. I could spot forgeries from across a room, identify the hesitation marks where a counterfeiter paused, see the pressure variations that revealed tracing. This signature had none of those tells. The fear wasn't that someone forged my name. The fear was that I couldn't remember writing it. I sat back feeling the room tilt. October 23rd was 2 weeks ago. Surely I would remember signing away $333,000. I checked the routing number. A charitable foundation in Delaware. Midwestern Neurological Research Fund. Professional website board members with credentials. Focused on Alzheimer's research. The kind of place someone with my diagnosis might donate to. The kind of place someone planning careful fraud would create as a front. I pulled out my jeweler's loupe, examined the signature under magnification. The ink flow was consistent. The pressure curves matched my muscle memory. There was even a tiny blot where the pen had paused exactly where I always paused before the final stroke, a habit from decades of signing audit reports. Someone had either studied my signature for years practicing until they could replicate not just the shape, but the rhythm, the pressure, the unconscious habits. Or I had signed this and completely forgotten. The pocket watch on my desk. My father's ticked steadily, measuring seconds. I could still count memories I might still have tomorrow. That was the horror of this disease. Every gap in memory could be the illness or it could be something else. Every moment of doubt became a weapon. Footsteps on the stairs, light measured. Leora knocked on the door frame. "Sterling, it's time for the white capsule." Her smile was warm, concerned, perfect. "I'll be right down," I said. "I can bring it up if you'd like." "No, I need the movement." She hesitated, and for just a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Calculation. It vanished too quickly to identify. "Of course," she said. "I'll have it ready downstairs." Her footsteps retreated. I looked at the signature again. The careful downstroke on the G, the slight tremor on the final N that had appeared 3 years ago. Every detail was mine. And for the first time in 71 years, I couldn't trust whether my own hand had written it or whether something far more calculated was happening in the glass house that was supposed to be my sanctuary. That evening, when I showed my son the bank statement, I watched his face for the micro-expressions I'd spent 30 years learning to read in interrogation rooms, never expecting I'd need those skills on my own child. Rowan Garrison, 39, arrived from his Chicago office, still wearing his work tie, the same focused expression he'd inherited from me, now clouded with worry, as he looked at the document I'd just handed him. He stood in the living room, winter darkness pressing against the glass walls, studying the withdrawal line, with the careful attention of someone who built his cybersecurity startup by finding patterns others missed. $340,000, he said quietly. "Dad, when did you—" The kitchen door opened. Leora appeared in the doorway, saw the bank statement in Rowan's hands, and her face crumpled. "Oh no," she whispered. "Sterling, I thought you wanted to wait to tell him." Rowan looked between us. "Wait to tell me what—" Leora crossed to the couch, sat down, and tears began streaming down her face with perfect timing. I'd seen 1,000 liars cry on command in interrogation rooms, but my son hadn't. "Your father," she said, voice breaking, "wanted to make a meaningful donation to Alzheimer's research at Northwestern. He said—" She paused, wiped her eyes. "He said it was how he wanted to leave a legacy. Something good from something terrible." Rowan's expression shifted. Not suspicion toward her, pity toward me. "Dad, is that true?" I opened my mouth, closed it. Because what could I say I don't remember? The disease makes that meaningless. It didn't happen. She'd just provided a complete narrative, Northwestern legacy, meaningful research details that sounded exactly like something I might say. "I have the paperwork," Leora continued, standing to fetch a folder from the kitchen. "The foundation sent a thank you letter. You read it twice, Sterling. Said you were proud to contribute to the fight against this disease." She handed Rowan a letter on official letterhead, Midwestern Neurological Research Fund. My signature at the bottom of the donation form attached. "The neurologist said this would start happening," Leora said, gently, looking at me with such perfect concern, "that you'd begin forgetting even significant decisions. I'm so sorry. I should have documented everything better." Rowan set the papers down, looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before, doubt about my reliability. "Dad," he said carefully, "I know this is hard, but just because you don't remember doesn't mean it didn't happen. The doctor warned us about this exact scenario." That was the first time my son looked at me like I was a child who needed supervision instead of the father who'd raised him alone after his mother died. "The medication," I started, "the pills she gives me, are prescribed by Dr. Reyes," Leora interrupted gently. "We go over them together every morning, Sterling. You know this." I watched Rowan's face, saw the decision forming, his wife or his father, the young woman who seemed devoted or the old man whose mind was deteriorating. He chose her. "Maybe we should increase the home care hours," Rowan said to Leora, not to me. "Make sure Dad has more support." "I think that's wise," she agreed. They discussed me like I wasn't in the room, like I was already gone, just a problem to be managed. I sat in my leather chair surrounded by glass walls that suddenly felt like an exhibit case and understood I'd lost the first battle. When Rowan left an hour later, he hugged me carefully the way you hug something fragile. something breaking. "I love you, Dad," he said. "We're going to take good care of you." We, not I, we. He was already part of her team. That night I lay awake in my bedroom, the medication making my thoughts swim, but not enough to drown the clarity of what had just happened. She'd prepared for this confrontation. Had the Northwestern story ready the letterhead, the emotional performance. She'd anticipated every move. I rose before dawn when the house was still dark, went to the kitchen and sat at the table staring at Lake Geneva through the windows as gray light slowly revealed the frozen water. Footsteps on the stairs, light careful, not Leora's. Estella Newberry, 66, had been my housekeeper for only 3 weeks, a position she'd quietly arranged through a mutual contact after recognizing a name in a Lake Geneva property listing. The way she entered the kitchen, silent, deliberate, told me this wasn't a chance encounter. She had come here looking for something, or watching for something. She wore her usual dark blue cardigan, her silver hair pulled back, her face showing decades of lines that spoke of hard experience. She didn't greet me, didn't ask if I needed coffee, just crossed to the table and placed something small and square on the surface between us. A used medical patch, the adhesive kind, the kind Leora pressed to my shoulder each morning during the medication routine. Estella met my eyes. "A real caregiver never hides medicine in the dark," she whispered, her voice low but steady. I picked up the patch, examined it in the growing light. The brand name was different from what Dr. Reyes had prescribed. The dosage marking showed 7.5 milligrams. My prescription was for 2.5. Triple dose, wrong medication entirely. "Where did you find this?" I asked quietly. Estella glanced toward the ceiling, toward the bedroom where Leora slept, then back at me. Still silent, I understood. She'd been watching. Long enough to see the morning routine, long enough to retrieve a patch from the bathroom trash, long enough to decide whose side she was on. "Thank you," I whispered. She nodded once, then returned to her morning tasks, starting the coffee, arranging the breakfast dishes, both of us performing normalcy. But in 30 years of investigation, I'd learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than testimony. She hadn't said a word, but she'd just handed me the first physical evidence that what was happening to me wasn't my imagination. The glass walls that surrounded us let in all the winter light, but trapped every lie inside, refracting them until I couldn't tell reflection from reality. I slipped the nerve patch into my pocket as Estella continued her tasks, both of us performing normalcy for cameras we couldn't see. But now I knew 3 things: someone was medicating me with unauthorized drugs, my son wouldn't believe me, and somewhere in this glass house was at least one person who'd been watching long enough to collect evidence. The question was how many others had noticed, and why hadn't they spoken? 2 weeks after Estella's silent warning, I installed the camera at 2 a.m. while the house slept, a tiny lens hidden in the carved frame of a family photo aimed at the exact spot where Leora administered my morning medications. The frame had sat on the living room bookshelf for 5 years, holding a picture of Rowan at his college graduation. Oak carved edges positioned at shoulder height, perfect angle to capture the glass coffee table and the couch where the daily medication ritual occurred. I'd spent 3 nights planning the placement, another week ordering the equipment through a vendor who wouldn't flag the purchase to anyone monitoring my accounts. The camera was state-of-the-art, motion-activated, 7-day battery memory card that could hold 2 weeks of footage. The same model I'd used in surveillance operations 15 years ago when corporate fraud investigations required documenting evidence that would hold up in court. I worked in darkness, the winter moon reflecting off Lake Geneva, providing just enough light to see. My hands trembled slightly, the medication or the fear of being caught. I told myself it was the former. Positioned the lens, tested the angle, activated the motion sensor. The tiny red indicator light blinked once, then went dark. Evidence. Finally, I would have evidence. I returned to bed at 3:15. Leora hadn't stirred. The next morning I came downstairs expecting the frame to be gone. Removed, destroyed, or confronted. My heart hammered as I entered the living room. The frame sat exactly where I'd placed it. Leora moved through her morning routine, brewing coffee, arranging the pills on the white ceramic dish, checking her notes on timing and dosage. She walked past the bookshelf twice, didn't glance at the frame, didn't pause. When I checked the next morning and saw it still there untouched, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. I was wrong. 5 days after installation, the camera had logged 32 hours of footage. Most of it mundane: Leora bringing me pills, making notes, occasionally adjusting the cushions on the couch. I reviewed the recordings each afternoon while she was occupied elsewhere in the house, watching on my laptop with headphones, searching for the moment that would prove what Estella's nerve patch had already told me. On day 3, I found it. The timestamp read 9:47 a.m. November 21st. I'd been upstairs taking a shower. Liora entered the living room carrying nothing. No pills, no water glass, no purpose I could identify. She stood exactly in the camera's center frame, looked directly at it for 3 seconds. I wouldn't understand how until later. The villa's security system installed by Liora 6 months ago as a safety upgrade she'd arranged without my knowledge had detected the camera's wireless signal during its nightly sweep. She'd been alerted to a new device on the network the same morning I'd finished installation. She'd known before I'd even tested the angle. Then she pressed her left wrist against the corner of the coffee table, the carved oak edge that jutted out at a 90-degree angle. Pressed hard. Held it there while she counted silently, lips moving. Released. Examined the skin. Pressed again, harder. She pressed her wrist to the table corner 3 times, testing pressure, checking color. Like an artist perfecting a brush stroke. A bruise bloomed. Deep purple, the kind that looks severe, the kind that suggests impact or violence. Then she walked to the bar cart in the corner, selected a crystal tumbler from the collection and dropped it. Not through dropped. Let it fall from waist height onto the hardwood floor where it shattered into dozens of pieces. She arranged herself on the couch, positioned her bruised wrist in clear view, and began to cry. The tears appeared on command. No build-up, no hesitation. Just there. The way only a trained performer or a practiced liar could summon them. She held that pose, bruised wrist cradled against her chest, tears streaming, expression of perfect, confused fear for exactly 4 minutes. Then I heard my own footsteps on the recording. Heavy rushed. I'd heard the glass break upstairs was coming down to investigate. How do you prove someone is lying when they've manufactured perfect evidence of their own victimhood, when the camera you installed to catch them becomes the very instrument of your entrapment? The recording showed me entering the frame. My face was red. I'd been in a hot shower. My fists were clenched. I'd been startled by the crash. My eyes were wide. I'd been worried about what happened. But to someone who didn't know context, to someone watching without the preceding 4 minutes, I looked angry, threatening, dangerous. Liora looked up at me with those same tears, that same expression. I don't know what happened, she said in real-time voice, trembling. The glass just slipped and did I do something wrong? I'd stood there dripping from the shower, trying to understand what I was seeing. A broken glass, a bruised wrist, my daughter-in-law crying on the couch. Are you hurt? I'd asked. I'm fine, she'd whispered. I'm so sorry. I'm always breaking things lately. I'm so clumsy. On the recording, my expression softened. I'd believed her then. Thought she'd simply had an accident. Now, watching the full footage, I understood. Every element was calculated. The bruise, self-inflicted. The glass deliberately dropped. The tears summoned. The timing perfect. She had performed for the camera. No worse, she had performed for a camera she knew was there. I sat in my office laptop screen glowing and replayed the moment she'd looked directly at the lens. 3 seconds. Direct eye contact with the device I'd hidden at 2 a.m. while she supposedly slept. She had known about the camera all along. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. In 30 years of fraud investigation, I'd learned that the guilty always reveal themselves when they think they're not being watched. I'd forgotten that the truly dangerous ones perform best when they know the cameras are rolling. The medication made my thoughts swim, but this clarity cut through. She'd let me install it, let me think I had the advantage, then created evidence that would make me look like an aggressor while casting herself as the frightened victim. If someone saw only the final 40 seconds of that recording, me entering with clenched fists and red face while she sat crying with a fresh bruise, they'd see abuse. They'd see an elderly man with deteriorating judgment becoming violent. They'd see exactly what she wanted them to see. I stood in that living room looking at her bruised wrist and tear-stained face and understood with perfect clarity she had prepared this performance before I'd even thought of installing the camera. She'd anticipated my every move, planned for my investigator's instincts, and turned my own surveillance into evidence that I was the danger. The recording that was supposed to protect me would now destroy me. From the hallway, I watched silently as Liora took my son's hand and led him toward his office. Through the glass walls of this villa, everything was visible. Absolute transparency turned into total exposure. Rowan had arrived for a routine check-in. Liora met him at the door, her eyes red from staged crying. She pulled the laptop toward her, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the confidence of someone who had prepared exactly what she was about to show. I installed a camera a few days ago, she whispered. I was worried about how he was acting when you weren't here. Just watch. The screen flickered. Video footage appeared, my own camera's recording from the family photo frame, but the timestamp showed only 40 seconds. She had edited it, cutting the first 3 minutes and 20 seconds where she had bruised her own wrist, smashed the glass, and staged her tears. There was no sound, which made it worse. On screen, I stormed into the living room, my face flushed from the hot shower, fists clenched in startlement from the breaking glass. Leora stood small, cradling her bruised wrist, looking up at me with manufactured terror. Without my voice asking if she was hurt, the scene looked exactly like a dangerous old man confronting a helpless young woman. "I didn't want to show you this," Leora sobbed. "Look at his eyes, Rowan. That's not confusion from the medication, that's rage." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Did he hurt you?" "That bruise? He grabbed me," she lied softly. "I'm afraid. What if next time it's worse?" Rowan stood up, running a hand through his hair. He looked toward the office door, and our eyes met through the glass. That was the moment. I saw it happen the instant my son stopped seeing his father and started seeing a threat. He walked out into the hallway, standing 15 feet away. "Dad, can we talk?" "She is setting me up," I said, keeping my voice steady through 30 years of interrogation training. "Did you see the whole thing, or just the part she wanted you to see?" Rowan's expression shifted to deep concern, the kind you show to someone paranoid. "Dad, I know the medication can cause confusion, but I am not confused." Leora appeared in the doorway, placing a hand on Rowan's shoulder. A united front, them against me. "Dad, I think we need to talk about increasing your care level," Rowan said quietly. "Maybe having someone here 24 hours, for everyone's safety." He meant Leora's safety. "You don't believe me," I said bitterly. "I believe you don't remember," Rowan replied gently. "And that's what scares me." He had made his choice. The edited footage had done its work. I caught the brief flash of satisfaction in Leora's eyes before her concerned wife mask slipped back into place. Through the glass window, Rowan turned back toward the hallway. His hand moved instinctively to place himself between Leora and me, a protective stance I had taught him as a boy to use against strangers. I had lost him, at least for now. 1 week after my son looked at me with fear, I made the decision that would change everything. When Leora handed me the evening medication, I placed the pill under my tongue instead of swallowing, and for the first time in a month, I stayed awake past midnight. She'd brought the pills at 9:30 the usual time. Blue capsule first, then the white one, watching to ensure I swallowed both with water. I'd become practiced at the deception over the past 3 nights, letting the pill rest under my tongue, keeping my expression neutral, waiting until she left before spitting it into my hand and flushing it down the bathroom sink. The first night I'd tried it, I'd expected minimal difference, maybe slightly less drowsiness. Instead, by 11 p.m., my mind was sharper than it had been in weeks. The fog that had been pressing down on my thoughts since mid-October lifted like morning mist burning off the lake. I could remember what I'd eaten for breakfast, could recall the exact wording of conversations from 2 days prior, could think in complete complex sentences without the thoughts scattering halfway through. They'd been sedating me, heavily, not just managing symptoms, actively suppressing cognitive function. By midnight, I was fully awake, lying in bed in the dark master bedroom, listening to the house settle around me. Leora slept in the guest room down the hall, had moved there 3 weeks ago, claiming my restless movements were keeping her awake. Another isolation tactic I'd been too medicated to recognize. At 2 a.m., I heard footsteps, light, careful, the guest room door opening. I kept my breathing steady, deep, the rhythm of sleep. My eyes closed, but not completely, just enough to see through my lashes if light changed. My bedroom door opened. Leora stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the hallway light, watching, listening, making sure I was unconscious. She crossed to the window, pulled out her phone, and made a call. "He's asleep now," she whispered. "The increased dosage is working. He's been out by 10 p.m. every night this week. Lyle, we're on schedule for the hearing in 11 days. Dr. Lyle Sinclair's voice came through the speaker, tinny but clear. 48 years old, board-certified neurologist, and the man who would testify in 11 days that I was no longer competent to manage my own affairs. "The incapacity evaluation is set for December 3rd, Dr. Sinclair said. "I've prepared the medical documentation. Once he's declared incompetent, the property transfer can proceed without his signature. The conservatorship papers." "Rowan's signing those tomorrow night," Leora interrupted. "He doesn't know what they really authorize, thinks it's just standard power of attorney for medical decisions." "And the villa sells the day after the hearing. Buyers already lined up, cash offer, no inspection. We'll be in Lisbon by December 10th. My heart rate stayed at 60 beats per minute, steady, controlled, the way it had in 100 surveillance operations when suspects didn't know I was listening. 11 days until they declared me legally incompetent and took everything I'd spent 71 years building. What about the son? Dr. Sinclair asked. Once he realizes, by the time Rowan understands what happened, we'll be gone and the money will be in accounts he can't touch, Leora said. He'll think his father's condition deteriorated naturally, that I did everything I could, that the stress became too much and I needed to start over somewhere else. The edited footage helps, Dr. Sinclair said. Makes you look like the victim who tried her best. Exactly, and Sterling's own camera created it. She laughed quietly. He tried to catch me. Instead, he gave me the perfect evidence of his violent instability. She ended the call, stood at the window for another minute looking out at Lake Geneva, then left the room as silently as she'd entered. I lay in the dark processing what I'd just heard. December 3rd, 11 days from now. Incapacity hearing with false medical documentation. Rowan signing conservatorship papers tomorrow night without understanding what they authorized. The villa sold the day after the hearing. $17.3 million disappearing into untraceable accounts. And me declared legally incompetent to stop any of it. I waited until 5 a.m. when the house was still dark and silent, then rose and went to my small study. Closed the door, turned on only the desk lamp. My phone sat on the desk where I'd left it. I opened the messaging app, scrolled to the thread with Conrad Holbrook. The messages I'd sent 3 days ago detailed observations about Leora's behavior. Questions about how to document suspected fraud were gone. Not deleted by me, just absent. The thread showed only his replies, my half of the conversation erased. I checked my email. The draft I'd written to my estate attorney requesting an emergency review of all financial transactions from the past 6 months had been redirected to a folder labeled Archive, Do Not Send, a folder I'd never created. My own phone had become my prison warden. Remotely monitored, increasingly controlled, I'd watched it happen in stages over the past week, each communication channel going dark one by one. The text to Conrad I'd sent 3 days ago, before the monitoring reached full lockdown, was almost certainly the last message I'd gotten through undetected. I was completely isolated. I opened the bottom desk drawer, pulled out an old leather notebook from 2009. Investigation logs from a classified corporate fraud case. The pages were filled with shorthand that looked like gibberish unless you knew the cipher. The accounting code Conrad and I had used was simple but unbreakable substitute financial symbols for letters, dates for locations, witness names as account numbers. We'd developed it for cases where digital records couldn't be trusted, where we assumed our emails were being monitored. I turned to a blank page and began writing. November 23rd, 2024. 11 days until incapacity hearing. Dr. Lyle Sinclair, neurologist, preparing false medical documentation. Conservatorship papers, Rowan signing tomorrow without understanding scope. Villa sale December 4th, cash buyer arranged. Total fraud $17.3 million. Escape plan Lisbon, December 10th. All written in symbols that looked like accounting entries, meaningless to anyone except Conrad. The glass house had become a fishbowl where I was, the specimen observed from all sides, every movement recorded, but they'd forgotten that some fish have teeth. I finished the entry, closed the notebook, and crossed to the far wall, where a decorative fireplace stood deactivated years ago when the house converted to radiant heat. Behind the false panel on the left side was a small alcove I'd used for storing sensitive documents. I pressed the panel, felt it click, pulled it open, slipped the notebook inside, closed it. 11 days to dismantle a conspiracy that had been building for years. No phone, no email, no son's trust, and a disease that was real even if they'd been accelerating its symptoms. But I still had my mind, the investigator's mind that had dismantled 200 fraud schemes. And now I knew exactly what I was fighting against. On the 3rd day of my 11-day countdown to legal extinction, I watched through the glass wall as my son signed away every right I had left, and he had no idea what he was doing. It was 11 p.m. Rowan had been in his home office for 14 straight hours, battling an emergency server crash that threatened his entire cybersecurity startup. Through the glass walls that connected every room of this villa, I could see him hunched over his desk. 3 monitors glowing blue, with cascading error messages, phone pressed to his ear. "The entire authentication server is down," he was saying, voice tight with stress. "If we don't fix this in the next hour, we lose the client. Everyone stay on the line." His second monitor chimed. New email. I couldn't see the sender from where I stood in the hallway, but I knew. The subject line was visible even from 15 feet away. Urgent. Medical forms for Dad's evaluation. Please sign tonight. Rowan glanced at it, opened the attachment with one hand while typing commands with the other, still on the phone with his crisis team. A PDF, 40 pages. He scrolled to the last page, found the signature line, scrawled his name without reading a single paragraph of the preceding 39 pages, sent it back, returned his full attention to the server crisis. The entire transaction took 90 seconds. That was the moment. 40 pages of legal documents disguised as medical paperwork timed to arrive when my son was too exhausted to read, too trusting to question, too distracted to understand he'd just given her control over everything I owned. I'd seen the actual document 2 days ago, had found a printed copy in Leora's locked drawer when she was out shopping, picked the lock with tools I kept from my investigator days, photographed every page with my camera before the phone was remotely disabled, memorized the key clauses. Page 17, full property custody granted to spouse in cases of demonstrated incapacity. Page 23, communication restrictions authorized to prevent patient distress and confusion. Page 31, medical power of attorney superseding all previous directives. Rowan had just authorized Leora to control where I lived, who I could contact, and every medical decision affecting my life. He'd done it thinking he was signing a standard hospital form. My son's signature on that document was beautiful. The same confident script I'd taught him to write in second grade practiced on birthday cards and school permission slips, now unknowingly signing away his father's autonomy. I retreated to my bedroom, locked the door from inside one of the few locks I still controlled, sat on the edge of the bed and calculated my remaining resources. 8 days until the incapacity hearing. No phone access, no email, no son's trust. 40 pages of legal documents now granting Leora authority over my property and communication. The coded notebook hidden behind the fireplace panel was my only record of the conspiracy. I needed to test one more variable external intervention. At 3 a.m., I stood in the center of my locked bedroom and screamed. Not a word, just a raw, desperate sound. The kind an elderly man in distress would make. The kind that should bring neighbors running, that should trigger wellness checks, that should result in anyone questioning whether the old man in the glass house needed help. I screamed 3 times, loud enough to wake anyone within 100 yards. Then I waited. Footsteps in the hallway, Leora's voice outside my door. "Sterling, are you all right?" I didn't answer. The doorknob turned, locked. "Sterling, open the door. You're having another episode." I lay down on the bed, silent, now listening. She waited 30 seconds, then walked away. I heard her on the phone in the hallway. Yes, it happened again. He was screaming, completely incoherent. "No, I can't get in. He locked the door from inside. I'm worried he might hurt himself." A pause. "Thank you. I'll watch through the night, make sure he's safe." She never tried to unlock the door, never called for emergency help, just made sure her concerned caregiver performance was documented. The experiment had one more component. The next morning, I watched from my bedroom window as Nora Kendrick, 64, my neighbor from the house across the way, walked her garden path toward our property. Her 30 years as a forensic nurse had made her instinctively assess whether sounds in the night indicated medical emergency or psychiatric crisis, a skill that would tragically lead her to the wrong conclusion. Leora met her at the garden gate. "I'm so sorry if he woke you last night," Leora said, her voice carrying across the morning air. "The dementia episodes are getting worse. He didn't recognize me, kept shouting that someone was trying to hurt him. It breaks my heart." Nora's expression shifted from concern to sympathy. "Oh, Leora, I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you," she said. "And with Rowan working such long hours, you're handling this with such grace. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate." "That's so kind. I just want to make sure he's safe. The neurologist says we need to increase supervision, maybe consider—" Leora's voice caught. "Maybe consider residential care if it gets worse." "That must be such a hard decision," Nora said, reaching across the gate to squeeze Leora's hand. "But you're doing the right thing, thinking of his safety first. What do you do when your cry for help becomes evidence of your instability, when the very act of seeking rescue is used to prove you're too dangerous to deserve it?" I stood at my bedroom window watching Nora hurry back to her house, convinced by Leora's performance that I was the threat, not the victim. In 3 days, I'd lost my son's trust, my legal rights, and my neighbor's willingness to question what was happening. 8 days remained until the incapacity hearing, complete systematic isolation achieved. But what Leora didn't know was that 2 days ago, before my phone was fully controlled, I'd managed to send one final text message to Conrad Holbrook, 2 words and a sequence of numbers. "Audit urgent," followed by what looked like a random 12-digit account number. Except it wasn't random. It was the cipher we'd used during classified investigations 15 years ago. Financial notation that spelled out fraud villa 11 days. Somewhere in Chicago, that message was waiting to be decoded by the one person who would understand exactly what those symbols meant. I wouldn't learn until 3 days later what happened when my coded message reached Chicago. But Conrad told me the story in such detail I can see it as if I'd been there. Conrad Holbrook, 58, sat in his Chicago office, surrounded by file boxes from closed fraud cases, staring at a text message that used the cipher only one person in the world would still remember: his former partner, who'd taught him that the best codes were the ones hidden in plain sight. The message came from an unknown number. 2 words, "audit urgent," followed by a 12-digit sequence that looked like an account number. To anyone else, it was spam. Wrong number. Delete and forget. But Conrad had spent 15 years working fraud investigations with me. He recognized the pattern instantly. The cipher was simple. We'd used accounting symbols as letter substitutes, transaction dates as location markers. Only someone who'd worked financial fraud investigations in 2009 would recognize it. Only I would still remember it. He decoded the sequence in under 2 minutes. The numbers weren't random. They were a Bitcoin wallet address. And if I was sending him crypto coordinates, it meant I'd found the money trail. Conrad pulled up his blockchain analysis software, the same tools he used to trace cryptocurrency laundering for corporate clients, entered the wallet address I'd sent. The transaction history appeared. 3 wallets, each one washing the transfer through a different exchange. Retirement account to wallet A to wallet B to wallet C. Classic laundering pattern. And each wallet opened within the last 90 days. He traced backward from wallet C, found the initial deposit transferred from a bank account at First National, Wisconsin. Account holder Sterling Garrison. Amount the missing funds from my retirement. Then he traced forward, watched the money move through 3 consecutive cold wallets, each transfer obfuscating the trail with mixing services and exchange conversions. 3 wallets, 3 layers of laundering, and at the end of the chain, the stolen money waiting to disappear forever. But it was still there, still traceable, still recoverable if someone moved fast enough. Conrad told me later that was the moment he knew I wasn't confused, wasn't imagining things, wasn't suffering from dementia-induced paranoia. I'd sent him the exact evidence he needed, encrypted in a code only we knew, proving that my mind was sharp enough to investigate, document, and communicate a complex financial fraud. He immediately began building the case file. While Conrad was tracing crypto wallets in Chicago, I was experiencing something I'd never felt before: the active theft of my own memory. Day 6. Morning. I lay in bed, pretending sleep, eyes barely open, watching Leora through my lashes as she entered my bedroom at 7 a.m. She carried her usual morning supplies: the pill organizer, the water glass, the small white box I'd assumed contained the prescribed nerve patches. Except this morning I watched more carefully. The box she pulled from wasn't labeled with Dr. Sinclair's practice. It was plain white, pharmaceutical quality, but unmarked. No prescription label, no dosage information, no manufacturer name. She opened it, removed a single transdermal patch, and approached the bed. I kept my breathing steady, deep, rhythmic, the pattern of sleep. She peeled back the blanket, slightly lifted my shirt, applied the patch to my shoulder blade where I couldn't see it, couldn't easily remove it myself without assistance. The patch was larger than the prescribed ones, different texture. I felt it adhere to my skin with stronger adhesive. She smoothed it down, adjusted my shirt, pulled the blanket back into place, left the room. I waited 10 minutes, then carefully reached back, trying to peel off the patch. The adhesive was industrial strength. I'd need both hands and a mirror to remove it completely without tearing skin. Within 20 minutes, I felt the drowsiness. Not the heavy sedation from the pills I'd been hiding under my tongue, but something different, lighter, more insidious. A fog that settled specifically over my short-term memory. I tried to fight it. Stood up, walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face. The fog persisted. By mid-morning, I was sitting in my study trying to remember where I'd hidden the coded diary. I knew I'd hidden it. Knew it was somewhere safe, behind, no under, inside. My hands were shaking. I knew I'd hidden it 12 hours ago. Knew I'd remember. I always remembered. I checked the desk drawers. Empty. The filing cabinet, nothing. Behind the bookshelf, no. Under the desk blotter, not there. I stood in the center of the room, panic building. The diary contained everything: the overheard conversation with Dr. Sinclair, the 11-day timeline, the Lisbon escape plan. If I couldn't find it, I had no record. No proof. Just the scattered memories of an old man whose disease made him unreliable. 40 minutes. 40 minutes of searching my own house, doubting my own actions, wondering if I'd hallucinated writing it at all. Then my eyes landed on the decorative fireplace. The false panel. I crossed to it, pressed the spot I knew would click. The panel opened. The diary sat exactly where I'd left it, leather spine visible in the alcove. The diary was exactly where I'd left it, fingers touching the leather spine, and I wanted to weep with relief and rage relief that I wasn't insane, rage that she'd made me believe I might be. I pulled it out, clutched it to my chest, and understood. This was what she'd been doing to me for a month. The patches weren't just sedating me, they were creating specific targeted amnesia. Short-term memory disruption that made me forget where I'd put things, what I'd said, what I'd planned. Gaps that accumulated until I couldn't trust my own mind. Evidence of cognitive decline. Documented. Witnessed. Perfectly timed to support Dr. Sinclair's incapacity evaluation. I sat on the floor of my study diary in my hands, understanding for the first time what Leora had been doing to me. The medication wasn't just sedating me, it was stealing specific memories, creating gaps that made me doubt everything I knew. The feeling of remembering something while simultaneously feeling it slip away, of knowing you hid something vital, but unable to trust where or when, or if that was a fear I couldn't describe to anyone who hadn't lived it. But now I knew the mechanism, and knowing meant I could fight it. Understanding the mechanism of memory theft gave me clarity, but it was what Conrad discovered in Milwaukee that gave me hope and horror in equal measure. In her Milwaukee apartment, Cosima Prescott's fingers flew across 3 keyboards simultaneously, recovering files from a cloud backup that Leora had never known existed, and what she found in those deleted folders would transform this from elder abuse into something far more calculated. Conrad called me on day 6, using Estella's prepaid phone, the only communication channel Leora hadn't discovered. He spoke quickly, knowing we had maybe 5 minutes before the pattern of my isolation would be noticed. "I found someone who can recover deleted files," he said. Cosima Prescott, 29, data recovery specialist in Milwaukee. She works from an apartment that looks more like a forensics lab. If Leora deleted anything from Rowan's devices, Cosima can find it. "Rowan's devices are monitored," I said, "but his automatic cloud backup isn't. It runs independently, archives everything. Leora controlled his phone and laptop, but she didn't know about the backup." 2 hours later, Conrad called again. His voice was different, tight. "Sterling, you need to hear this. Cosima found..." He paused. "You weren't a random victim. She hunted you." He told me what Cosima had recovered, an Excel spreadsheet tracking every withdrawal by date amount, fabricated justification. Professional accounting of the fraud, maintained with the precision of someone who'd done this before. But that wasn't the worst part. "She has a folder," Conrad said, "containing your investigation files from 20 years ago, downloaded from secure government servers 3 years before she ever met Rowan. Cases you worked, criminals you prosecuted, testimony you gave. She studied you, Sterling, learned everything about your career, your methods, your history." I sat in my locked bedroom, phone pressed to my ear, understanding flooding through me. "The medical records," I said. "She hacked those too. Cosima found the files, your neurologist's diagnosis from 2021 Alzheimer's risk assessment cognitive baseline scores. She knew about the disease before Rowan did. She chose you specifically because the illness would make you doubt yourself. This wasn't opportunistic fraud. This was a hunting expedition. She had hunted me like prey, studied my weaknesses for 3 years, and married my son as the perfect disguise to get close enough to destroy me." "How did she access sealed investigation files?" I asked. "Those records were classified, stored on secure servers." "We don't know yet, but Cosima's tracing the digital fingerprints. Someone with serious hacking skills and government database access helped her. This goes deeper than one woman stealing from one elderly man." We had 5 days until the incapacity hearing. Now we had proof that Leora had planned this for years, but proof wasn't enough. We needed legal intervention. Conrad moved fast. Day 7, he drove to Lake Geneva and met with Marcus Whitmore, the estate attorney who drafted my will 15 years ago. Whitmore knew my signature intimately, had witnessed me sign dozens of documents over the years, watched my handwriting evolve as age and illness progressed. Which was exactly why he could recognize when that signature had been digitally forged. Conrad showed him the property transfer documents Leora had filed, the ones Rowan had unknowingly signed, authorizing her custody of my estate. Whitmore examined them under forensic magnification. "This is Sterling's signature," he told Conrad. "I'd recognize it anywhere, but look at the pressure map." He pulled up analysis software, scanned the document, displayed the ink pressure across each stroke. "No variation," Whitmore explained. "When you're 71 with early tremor, your hand pressure fluctuates. Micro adjustments, slight wobbles. This signature has mechanical consistency. Same pressure, same angle, stroke for stroke. It's a digital replication." He pulled up my 2015 tax returns from his files, compared the signatures side by side. "Identical," he said. "Not similar, identical. Down to the pixel." She scanned an old signature and pasted it onto new documents. Any forensic analyst would spot this in 30 seconds. "Can you stop the property transfer?" Conrad asked. "Emergency motion for temporary asset freeze. I can file today, get a judge to review by tomorrow morning. It'll freeze all accounts, block any transfers, prevent the villa sale." "For how long?" Whitmore's expression was grim. 72 hours without additional proof. After that, the freeze expires and she can proceed with the transfers. We need confession witnesses or irrefutable forensic evidence to make this permanent. 72 hours to gather evidence strong enough to stop a woman who'd spent 3 years preparing every detail of this crime, and we'd only just begun to understand how deep her planning went. Whitmore filed the emergency motion at 3 p.m. on day 7. By 5 p.m., a probate judge had signed the temporary freeze. All of my accounts, retirement savings, property deeds were locked. No withdrawals, no transfers, no sales for 72 hours. The villa couldn't be sold. The money couldn't be moved. Leora's timeline was blocked. But the freeze would also alert her that someone was investigating. Someone had found the forged signature. Someone was building a case against her. Conrad called me with the news at 6 p.m. "We bought 3 days," he said. 72 hours before the freeze expires on day 10. We need to use every minute. "She'll know," I said. "The court will notify all parties named on the property documents. She'll see the freeze order. She'll know someone's fighting back." "Yes," Conrad agreed. "Which means she'll either retreat or accelerate. My guess is accelerate." "What's her contingency plan?" "We're about to find out." I walked out of my bedroom that evening knowing we'd bought 3 days, 72 hours before the asset freeze expired and Leora could proceed with transferring everything. But the freeze would also alert her that someone was investigating, someone had found the forged signature, someone was building a case. We'd just declared war and she would respond. The question was how quickly and how viciously. The asset freeze declaration took 3 hours to reach her. I know because I was halfway down the hallway when I heard Leora's voice in the kitchen, low, urgent, speaking to someone who wasn't there, and I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing, knowing that whatever she was saying would determine whether I had days left to live or only hours. "The account freeze means someone found the signature," she said into her phone. "We can't wait for the court date. Switch everything to Plan B." I stayed motionless in the hallway. The glass walls that usually trapped me now gave me sight lines through 3 rooms. I could see her silhouette in the kitchen pacing. "I need the crypto transferred tonight," she continued. "Bypass the normal 7-day holds. I don't care what it costs. And the passport needs to be ready by Thursday. Different name, different photo, everything clean." A pause while whoever was on the other end responded. "Lisbon," she said. "Flight leaves December 10th, but I may need to move that up depending on..." Another pause. "No. The original timeline is compromised. Someone's investigating. Someone froze $17 million worth of assets, which means someone knows about the forged signatures." My heart hammered, but I kept my breathing silent, controlled. "Plan B," she said. "The lake. It'll look accidental elderly man with dementia, winter night, tragic fall through ice. The coroner won't question it, especially with Dr. Sinclair's documentation of cognitive decline and the video evidence of violent episodes. 4 days. She'd just given herself 4 days to kill me and disappear. Thursday or Friday at the latest," she said, "before the freeze expires, before whoever's helping him builds a stronger case." She ended the call. I heard the refrigerator open-close, the sound of water running, normal evening sounds from a woman who'd just planned my murder with the same tone she used to discuss grocery shopping. I retreated to my bedroom, locked the door, and understood with perfect clarity the frozen lake outside my window wasn't beautiful winter scenery. It was the murder weapon, and she'd been planning it since the day I moved into this glass coffin. I called Conrad on Estella's phone at midnight. "She's accelerating," I told him. 3 to 4 days. She's going to stage an accident on the lake." "We're moving as fast as we can," Conrad said. "Cosima's still pulling files. Whitmore's preparing the forensic report on the signatures. But Sterling, we need time we don't have." "Then we need a miracle," I said. The miracle came at 4 a.m., though I wouldn't know about it until the next afternoon. Conrad told me later what happened, and I've pieced together the details from what Nora herself described. Nora Kendrick couldn't sleep that night. Sat by her bedroom window overlooking my villa, the way she'd done increasingly often since the screaming incident a week ago. She'd been watching me with concern, watching Leora with sympathy, trying to understand the situation she'd witnessed. At 4 a.m., through the binoculars, she'd kept beside her window, since the screaming incident. A forensic nurse's habit, always prepared to assess medical emergencies at a distance. She saw Leora enter my darkened bedroom. Nora watched as Leora crossed to my bed carrying something small. Watched her lift my blanket, adjust my shirt. Saw the motion of hands applying something to my shoulder blade. Saw Leora dispose of what looked like a used medical patch, not in the bathroom trash where it should go, but in her pocket. 30 years as a forensic nurse had taught Nora one thing: medical care has rhythms, schedules, protocols. You don't change transdermal patches at 4 a.m. unless you're hiding the medication from someone who checks during daylight hours. Legitimate caregivers follow schedules. They document. They dispose of medical waste properly in designated containers following protocols designed to prevent contamination and ensure tracking. They don't pocket used patches. They don't perform medication changes in the dark. They don't work in secret. Nora sat at her window watching Leora leave my bedroom and started remembering other inconsistencies. The screaming incident, the way Leora had explained it too smoothly, too rehearsed, the bruises that appeared exactly when convenient. The elderly man everyone suddenly feared instead of helped. The pattern was wrong. Nora had spent decades in forensic nursing, working cases where caregivers harmed instead of helped, where proximity became opportunity, where trust became weapon. She'd seen this pattern before, just never with such perfect execution. At 5 a.m., she opened her laptop and searched Sterling Garrison Fraud Investigator. My professional history appeared. 30 years of financial fraud investigation, 200 cases, testimony that had put white-collar criminals in federal prison, a career built on finding patterns, exposing lies, documenting theft. Not the profile of a dangerous, delusional elderly man. The profile of someone who would recognize fraud when it was happening to him and someone who would be systematically discredited if he tried to report it. She found Conrad Holbrook's name listed as my former colleague on LinkedIn, sent a connection request with an urgent message. I'm Sterling Garrison's neighbor. I've witnessed behavior that suggests medical abuse. As a former forensic nurse, I recognize the pattern. We need to talk immediately. Sometimes the person who saves your life is the one who first believed you were dangerous because only someone trained to see patterns can recognize when the pattern is wrong. I stood at my bedroom window at dawn on day 8, watching Nora's house across the water, having no idea that she'd just sent a message to Conrad that would change everything. The woman I'd thought was convinced of my danger had spent the last hour researching my investigation history, connecting dots I couldn't connect myself, becoming the ally I never expected. She'd watched Leora change my medication in the dark. She'd recognized it as wrong, and unlike my son, unlike my neighbors, unlike everyone else who'd believed Leora's performance, Nora had professional training that made her trust patterns over personalities. By afternoon, Conrad would receive her message, and the investigation network would gain its most crucial witness, someone who'd been watching the villa close enough to provide the timeline, the observations, the professional expertise that would make everything else make sense. 3 days until Leora planned to kill me. 72 hours until the asset freeze expired. But now we had a forensic nurse who'd witnessed the 4 a.m. medication changes, who'd documented the inconsistencies, who knew the difference between legitimate care and criminal abuse. Sometimes miracles look like insomnia and a window with the right view. Nora's message reached Conrad at 9 a.m. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, 3 people I'd never seen together were gathering in a private clinic in Kenosha, 40 miles from the glass house where I was being slowly poisoned, to examine the evidence that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. I was having it stolen from me, one chemically induced gap at a time. Conrad told me everything that happened in that examination room, and I've reconstructed the details from his account and the laboratory report he showed me later. Estella arrived first carrying a sealed plastic bag containing 5 nerve patches she'd collected over 3 weeks. She'd learned to be careful in her previous nursing work. Medical evidence requires chain of custody documentation, preservation of condition. Nora arrived next, bringing her 30 years of forensic nursing expertise and the timeline she'd documented from watching the villa. The 4 a.m. medication changes, the disposal patterns that violated protocol, the behavioral inconsistencies that suggested systematic abuse rather than confused caregiving. Conrad brought the financial evidence, the cryptocurrency trail, the forged signatures, the 3-year research Leora had done before ever meeting my son. And Dr. Hugh Reyes brought 2 decades of experience recognizing when medication became weapon. Dr. Reyes, 53, had spent 20 years as a geriatrician specializing in elder abuse cases, and he recognized the pattern in the confiscated nerve patches immediately. Not because the medication was unusual, but because the dosage was precisely calibrated to cause maximum cognitive damage, while remaining just plausible enough to attribute to medical error. Estella handed him the sealed bag. "I saved these from the medical waste," she said. "When I worked at the care facility 15 years ago, I learned to recognize when medication doesn't match what's prescribed. These patches, they're pharmaceutical grade but completely unmarked. No prescription label, no manufacturer identification, nothing that would trace back to Dr. Sinclair's practice." Dr. Reyes examined them under magnification first. Then he conducted chemical analysis using spectroscopy equipment, breaking down the active compounds, measuring the dosage levels with laboratory precision. The results took 40 minutes to process. When the numbers appeared on his monitor, Conrad told me later, Dr. Reyes's expression shifted from professional focus to controlled anger, the kind of anger you only see in doctors who've dedicated their careers to protecting vulnerable patients from predators. 7.5 milligrams, Dr. Reyes said, pointing to the spectroscopy readout. For a patient Sterling Garrison's age and condition, the safe maximum dose is 2.5 milligrams. This is triple the therapeutic threshold. What does that dosage do? Nora asked. It weaponizes the symptoms, Dr. Reyes explained. This medication is designed to slow cognitive decline in Alzheimer's patients by modulating neurotransmitter activity. At prescribed doses, it helps. At this level, it accelerates everything the disease would eventually cause: memory loss, confusion, tremors, disorientation. The patient experiences rapid deterioration that looks exactly like natural progression. But it's not natural, Conrad said. No, this is chemically induced decline designed to make the victim doubt their own perception of reality. Every gap in memory, every moment of confusion becomes evidence that they're losing their mind when in fact their mind is being stolen from them systematically. For 3 weeks I'd questioned whether my failing memory was disease or age or fear, and now under fluorescent laboratory lights 40 miles from my home, a doctor I'd never met was confirming it had been poison all along. Is this enough for a criminal case? Conrad asked the question I would have asked. Dr. Reyes hesitated. It proves poisoning. The dosage level, the unmarked packaging, the unauthorized medication. This is deliberate harm, not medical error. But, Nora pressed. Proving she administered it intentionally, proving this wasn't a prescription mistake or patient confusion about which patches to apply, that requires confession, witness testimony, or catching her in the act. Medical evidence shows the crime happened. It doesn't always show who committed it. The financial evidence helps, Conrad said. The 3-year planning, the hacked medical records, the forged signatures, it establishes motive and pattern. For civil court, yes, Dr. Reyes agreed. You could freeze assets, reverse transfers, block the property sale. But criminal prosecution for attempted murder, for that, you need her to admit what she's doing, or you need witnesses who can testify they saw her apply unauthorized medication with intent to harm. Estella saw her, Nora said. Estella saw her apply patches, Dr. Reyes corrected gently, which could be legitimate medical care. Defense would argue she was following Dr. Sinclair's instructions. To prove intent, you'd need to catch her acknowledging the poisoning, admitting the plan, revealing why she's doing it. Conrad called me at 6 p.m. with the news using Estella's phone. We have medical proof, he said. Triple dose poisoning, systematic cognitive assault, everything documented. Dr. Reyes will testify. But Sterling. But I need to get her confession, I finished. Yes, the medical evidence proves you were poisoned. It doesn't prove she poisoned you. Not beyond reasonable doubt. Not enough for criminal charges. We had proof of the crime, but not proof of the criminal, and that meant the next move had to be mine. How do I get someone to confess to attempted murder? I asked. Make her think she's won, Conrad said. Make her believe the poisoning succeeded, that you're too far gone to be a threat, that she can safely reveal the full plan because you won't remember or won't be believed. Performance, I said. The most important one of your life. Can you do it? I thought about Lyora's performances over the past month. The tears on command, the concerned wife routine, the perfect victim act that had fooled my son, my neighbors, everyone except the 3 people now gathering evidence in a Kenosha clinic. I spent 30 years investigating fraudsters, I said. I know how they think, how they perform, what makes them reveal themselves. The question isn't whether I can do it. The question is whether I can do it in the 3 days before she drowns me in the lake. That evening, I received Conrad's encrypted message, 3 words in our old cipher, medical proof confirmed. They had evidence strong enough to prove I'd been poisoned, evidence that would stand up in court, evidence that validated every suspicion I'd had. But Dr. Reyes's warning echoed in my mind. Medical evidence shows the crime happened, not who committed it. To catch Leora, to stop her before Plan B put me at the bottom of a frozen lake, I needed her confession. And there was only one way to get a confession from someone who'd spent 3 years planning the perfect crime, make her believe she'd won. I spent day 8 planning my performance, how to convince Leora her poisoning had succeeded, how to lower her guard enough to confess. But at 6 a.m. on day 9, Conrad called with information that changed everything I thought I understood about why Leora wanted me dead. The 4th name had appeared on Cosima's screen moments earlier, and Conrad's voice was tight when he told me what she'd found. The pattern that emerged wasn't opportunistic elder abuse. It was serial predation with a body count, and I was next in line. She's done this before, Conrad said without preamble, 3 times over 9 years. And Sterling, they're all dead. Every single one died within 18 months of meeting her. I sat in my locked bedroom, phone pressed to my ear, listening to Conrad describe what Cosima had uncovered by cross-referencing Leora's digital footprint across financial databases, property records, and obituaries spanning nearly a decade. The first victim, Chicago, 2015. A 73-year-old retired accountant. Leora had been his physical therapist after knee surgery. 6 months of care, during which she systematically transferred $400,000 from his accounts. He fell down his basement stairs one Thursday afternoon. The coroner ruled it accidental death, elderly man, poor balance, tragic but not suspicious. The second victim, Milwaukee, 2018. A 69-year-old widow. Leora volunteered at the senior center where the woman played bridge twice weekly. 8 months of friendship, $280,000 in real estate fraud. The woman drowned in her bathtub during what was ruled an unfortunate accident. Elderly woman, possible stroke, tragic but not suspicious. The third victim, Wisconsin, 2021. A 71-year-old former state senator. Leora had been dating his nephew. 12 months of access, $520,000 from his pension fund. He fell into the lake while fishing alone. Accidental drowning, elderly man, known heart condition, tragic but not suspicious. Different approaches every time, Conrad explained. Therapist, volunteer, family connection. She adapts the method to the target, but the pattern is always the same: befriend, drain stage, and accident, disappear. 3 bodies over 9 years, 3 accidents in 3 different counties, and I would have been the 4th corpse if I hadn't learned to hide pills under my tongue. No one connected them, I said. No one was looking for a pattern. 3 different jurisdictions, years apart, different methods. Each one looked like exactly what it was supposed to look like: an elderly person having a fatal accident, until you add them together. How did she choose them? I asked. That's what I'm still trying to understand. The first 3 seem random, different cities, no obvious connection to each other or to her. But you, Conrad paused. You're different. And I think I know why. He spent the afternoon in the Illinois State Archives pulling my investigation files from 20 years ago. Case 2004-FC-1847, Shady Oaks Care Facility. I remembered the case instantly when he described it. Large-scale nursing home fraud. Facility operator named Celeste Ashford had been systematically defrauding elderly patients through forged documents and financial manipulation. I'd spent 6 months building the case, documenting every transfer, every forged signature, every vulnerable patient who'd been robbed. The facility administrator was arrested, convicted, served 8 years. The facility itself was shut down, licenses revoked, the family business destroyed. The administrator's name, Conrad said carefully, was Richard Ashford, Leora's father. The phone felt heavy in my hand. And there's a note in your file, Conrad continued, from the day of the arrest. You wrote 16-year-old daughter present at scene during arrest. Appeared shocked, non-complicit. Recommended no charges for minor. I remembered her now. A teenage girl standing in the facility's lobby watching as officers led her father away in handcuffs. Dark hair, wide eyes, completely silent. I'd made sure she wasn't charged, made sure the investigation understood she'd had no role in her father's crimes. That girl was Leora, Conrad said. She was 16 when you destroyed her family. Her father went to prison. Her mother's business collapsed. Their name became synonymous with elder abuse in Illinois care facility circles. 20 years ago, I said. 20 years. And then 3 years ago, she starts researching you, downloads your investigation history from secure servers, hacks your medical records, discovers you have early-stage Alzheimer's, and realizes you're the perfect target. The man who destroyed her family is now vulnerable, isolated, losing his memory. So she approaches Rowan, I said, understanding. She doesn't just approach him. She engineers a meeting, studies his business, his social circles, his habits, makes herself visible in places he frequents. The relationship isn't accident or even opportunism, it's a hunting strategy 20 years in the making. A 16-year-old girl watching her father arrested her mother's business, destroyed her family's name, ruined. And 20 years later, she walked into my life wearing a wedding ring and a smile, carrying 2 decades of perfectly patient rage. The other 3 victims, I said, were they connected to the 2004 case? I'm still checking. But Sterling, even if they weren't, even if those were just practice, just testing her methods, you were always the real target. She waited 20 years, planned for 3 more, and you welcomed her into your home. I sat in silence processing. The medication theft, the forged signatures, the systematic isolation. I'd thought it was about money. $17.3 million was a powerful motive. But this wasn't about money. The money was just fuel for the escape payment for the years of planning. This was about revenge. This was about a teenage girl who'd watched her life collapse and spent 2 decades planning to return the favor. Does this change your plan? Conrad asked. No, I said. It gives me an advantage. How? Because now I know why she wants me dead. I know what she'll want to say when she thinks I'm too far gone to fight back. She's not just going to confess to the fraud, she's going to tell me why. She's going to make sure I understand that the 16-year-old girl I tried to protect grew up to destroy me. And when she does, I'll have her on record. Conrad was quiet for a moment. You're going to use her revenge against her. Exactly, I said. Good. Now I know why she wants me dead, and that means I know exactly how to trap her. When Conrad told me that Lyora Ashford was the 16-year-old daughter who'd watched me arrest her father 20 years ago, I felt something shift inside me. Not fear, but the cold clarity that comes when a hunter finally understands what his prey has been hunting him for. I sat in my small office that evening, door locked, processing what Conrad had uncovered. She was 16, a child watching officers lead her father away in handcuffs because of my investigation. 20 years. She waited 3 more. She studied me, downloading my case files, hacking my medical records, engineering a meeting with my son. That level of patience, that depth of planning, that intensity of focus. It meant she'd need the ending to be perfect. She'd need me to know. In 30 years of investigating fraud, I'd learned that the smartest criminals all shared one fatal weakness. They couldn't resist proving their intellectual superiority. The accountant who'd embezzled $3 million but needed to explain his brilliant scheme to the FBI. The CFO who'd hidden offshore accounts for a decade but couldn't stop herself from detailing the process during interrogation. The con artist who'd stolen from 47 victims but had to make sure each one understood how clever she'd been. They needed recognition. They needed their victim or their captor to acknowledge the artistry of the crime. Lyora had spent 23 years on this revenge. She wasn't going to let me die confused thinking it was random elder abuse or opportunistic theft. She'd want me to know. She'd need me to understand that the 16-year-old girl I'd tried to protect had grown up to destroy me with perfect patient precision. That psychological need was my weapon. I pulled out the coded diary, opened to a fresh page, and began writing. Not in accounting cipher this time, in plain English, because I needed to think through the trap with absolute clarity. The plan was simple. Make Lyora believe her poisoning had succeeded beyond her expectations. Pretend to deteriorate rapidly. Increased trembling, stuttering, severe face blindness where I couldn't recognize my own son. Convince her I was days away from complete incapacitation, too far gone to be a threat, helpless enough that she could safely reveal the full scope of her plan. I'd spent 4 weeks as prey, chemically confused and socially isolated, watching my son fear me and my mind betray me, but the investigator who'd solved 200 fraud cases in 30 years was still there, waiting for the moment to strike back. I wrote the second coded message to Conrad detailing the trap timeline. 2 days of performance. On the 3rd day, I'd create the opportunity, a moment when Lyora thought I was alone, vulnerable, and too deteriorated to remember or report what she said. That's when she'd confess. Not because I'd force her, because she'd need to. I sealed the coded message in an envelope, left it in the false panel behind the fireplace for Estella to retrieve in the morning. She'd pass it to Conrad through the dead drop system. We'd established a specific bench in the public park where she walked each afternoon. Then I used Estella's prepaid phone to send a text to Cosima Prescott in Milwaukee. 3 words, technical setup needed. She called back within 5 minutes. What do you need? She asked. Automatic live stream alert system, I said. Small camera concealed in clothing sweater button or glasses frame. When activated, it needs to ping specific contacts immediately. Not record locally where it can be found and destroyed. Stream directly to secure server with automatic distribution to witness list. How many witnesses? As many as Conrad can arrange. Legal professionals, law enforcement people whose testimony would hold up in court. I can have it ready by tomorrow afternoon, Cosima said. Estella can pick it up from a neutral location. But Sterling, this only works if she doesn't know you're recording. She won't know, I said, because she'll be too focused on explaining how clever she's been. Before I reveal the trap I was setting, are you still here? Comment A, if you think this will work, or B, if she's too careful to fall for it. Add 1 short reason why. Quick note, the next part includes recreated details for impact, but the strategy is real. I ended the call and sat in the dark office thinking through every detail. The performance had to be perfect, too subtle, and Lyora would remain cautious, too obvious, and she'd recognize it as a trap. I needed to study the exact symptoms of advanced cognitive decline, not the chemically induced confusion I'd been experiencing, but the real progression of Alzheimer's that Lyora expected to see. The face blindness, the aphasia where words wouldn't come, the temporal disorientation where I'd lose track of what year it was, what day, what hour. For 30 years, I'd hunted people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. I knew how they thought. I knew how they performed. I knew their tells, their patterns, their psychological needs. Leora Ashford was brilliant, patient, ruthless. She'd spent 23 years preparing this revenge with the precision of a surgeon and the dedication of a zealot. But she had the same fatal flaw they all had. She needed to prove she was the smartest person in the room. What do you do when you discover your executioner has one fatal flaw, one psychological need that outweighs even their survival instinct? You exploit it. You make them believe they've won so completely that the performance of explaining their victory becomes irresistible. You give them the audience they've craved for 2 decades, a helpless, defeated victim who can finally understand the full scope of what was done to them. And while they're explaining, while they're revealing every detail of the 23-year plan with the pride of an artist discussing their masterpiece, you record every word. I press the false panel back over my coded diary, the trap now designed and ready to spring. Leora Ashford had spent 23 years preparing to destroy me, but she'd made one critical error. She'd chosen a victim who understood exactly how her kind of mind worked. The best con artist always wants their victim to know they've been outsmarted. That need for intellectual recognition is the weakness I'd exploited in 100 investigations. And in 2 days, when she thought I was helpless enough to confess, I'd use that same weakness to make her tell me everything while a live stream recorded every word. The trap was designed. Now came the hardest part, performing it. The tremor in my left hand wasn't an act anymore, maintaining a performance. This precise required real physical control, which meant letting my body betray exhaustion I couldn't afford to show. I'd been Sterling the Confused for 8 hours straight, and Leora had watched every stumble with the satisfied smile of a researcher observing lab results. Day 10. Morning had started with me shuffling to breakfast in my robe, forgetting what day it was, asking Leora 3 times if she'd seen my glasses while they sat on top of my head. Small confusions. Building the pattern. By noon, I'd progressed to misplacing my coffee cup 4 times in 10 minutes each time, genuinely unable to remember where I'd set it down because the cognitive load of faking severe dementia was actually impairing my short-term memory. By afternoon, I sat in my study pretending to read a book that was upside down, maintaining the position for 20 minutes while Leora checked on me twice each time, making a note on her phone. I was exhausted. Actually genuinely exhausted from pretending to be someone whose mind was falling apart. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then I heard Rowan's voice in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, agitated. "Marcus, I found your email in my spam folder," he was saying. "What the hell do you mean, asset freeze? When was this filed? 3 days ago." I kept my position in the study chair book still upside down, but every investigator instinct came alert. The 72-hour asset freeze. Rowan had just discovered it. Not through Leora's filtered information channels, but through spam recovery, a digital accident she hadn't anticipated. "All of Dad's accounts," Rowan continued, voice rising. "The retirement fund, the property deed, everything, Marcus. Why wasn't I notified immediately?" A pause while Marcus Whitmore explained. "Forged signatures," Rowan said slowly. "You're saying someone forged Dad's signatures on property transfer documents?" Another pause, longer this time. "No, Rowan's voice changed. "I need to talk to him. I need to ask him about this directly." Footsteps approaching. I adjusted my grip on the upside-down book, made my eyes slightly unfocused, let my mouth go slack. Rowan entered the study, looked at me, at the book, at my vacant expression. "Dad," he said carefully, "can we talk?" I looked up at him, blinked, let confusion cross my face. "I'm sorry," I said, voice wavering. Have we met? Are you from the county health department?" Rowan's face went white. "Dad, it's me. It's Rowan, your son." I studied him with what I hoped looked like genuine perplexity. "Rowan," I repeated. That's a nice name. Is that Irish? My son's name is David. He's coming to visit next week, I think. Or was that last week?" "Dad, my name is Rowan. I'm your son. I've always been Rowan." I shook my head slowly. No, David. Definitely David. He works in computers? Or was it architecture? I remember he liked to draw when he was little. Behind Rowan, Leora appeared in the doorway. I watched her face as she took in the scene, her husband confronting his father about the asset freeze, and the father unable to even recognize his own son. Satisfaction, pure, undisguised satisfaction, flickered across her expression for exactly 1 second before the concerned wife mask slid back into place. But Rowan saw it too. I watched his body language shift. The micro-hesitation, the slight turning of his head toward his wife, then back to me, the tightening grip on his phone, white knuckles visible. "Sterling, sweetheart," Leora said, crossing to my chair. She touched my shoulder and I caught the scent of lavender from her perfume. "This is Rowan, your son. Remember we talked about this at breakfast?" "Did we?" I asked. I'm sorry, I don't remember breakfast." "That's okay," Leora said with perfect patronizing tenderness. "The doctor said this would happen. The face blindness is progressing faster than expected." She turned to Rowan and I saw her calculate in real time what to say, how to explain the asset freeze while maintaining her narrative. "Rowan, maybe we should let your father rest. We can discuss the legal matters privately. This is clearly too much for him right now." Rowan looked at me, at his wife, back at me. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Maybe we should talk, privately." They left the study together. I heard their footsteps recede down the hallway, heard a door close. I sat alone with my upside-down book, maintaining the pose for another 5 minutes in case Leora returned. Then I carefully turned the book right side up and allowed myself 3 deep breaths. The performance was working, but it was also destroying me. Estella entered the study 20 minutes later carrying my actual medication, the real prescriptions, not Leora's poison patches. She set them on the desk and locked the door behind her. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, that I should have said week 1. I looked up at her, dropped the confused performance, let her see the real person. 15 years ago, Estella continued, I worked night shift at Willowbrook Extended Care in Kenosha. I was the floor nurse who reported the medication discrepancies in room 447, Celeste Ashford's room. You interviewed me twice during your 2004 investigation. I remembered. A nurse in her 50s, careful notes, detailed observations about medication dosages that didn't match patient charts. She'd been the initial whistleblower, the person whose report had triggered my investigation into the Ashford family's care facility fraud. You recognized Leora, I said. The first day she brought you to this house. I saw her face, and I saw Celeste Ashford's daughter. 16 years old the last time I'd seen her, but the same eyes, the same way of moving. I knew. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because I needed you to be sure too, Estella said. An old woman saying she recognized your daughter-in-law from a 20-year-old nursing home fraud case, you would have thought I was confused. I needed evidence you could hold in your hands before I said a single word. So I watched, I collected. I waited until what I had was undeniable. Estella pulled a manila folder from under her cardigan. I found these, employment records. She's worked under aliases at senior care facilities since 2009. She handed me the folder. Personnel file, C. Ashford 2009 to 2011. I opened it. Inside employment records showing Leora Ashford working as Celia Ash at 2 Chicago senior facilities. 3 years in total. Both facilities had later been investigated for unexplained patient falls, unexplained deaths, financial irregularities. My voice was steady when I asked the question. How many did she practice on before me? Estella met my eyes. Her answer was 4 words. At least 7 contacts, 3 confirmed deaths. The others financial victims who never reported because they thought they were losing their minds. 7 previous victims. The words echoed in my mind as Estella left with the personnel files promising to make copies for Conrad. I sat in my study that evening understanding that what I'd thought was personal revenge had been practice rehearsal refinement of technique across 15 years and 8 targets. At 10:30 p.m. my phone buzzed, voicemail from an unknown number. I played it. Mr. Garrison, I don't know if you'll get this. She told me you're too far gone, but I can't be part of murder. Dr. Lyle Sinclair. The physician Leora had recruited to falsify my cognitive assessments. His voice was shaking. I only agreed to falsify the assessments for money, not murder. She said it was financial fraud, that you'd never know that the cognitive decline was happening anyway, so the documentation just accelerated the timeline. But tonight she called about Plan B, about the lake, about making it look like an accident. I can't. A pause. Sound of breathing. I falsified assessments for 3 others. She has proof. Recordings of me discussing the fraud. But drowning someone in freezing water, I thought you should know she's accelerating Plan B. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. The message ended. I sat motionless, then forwarded it to Conrad with a text, copy to secure drive, doctor just became our 4th witness. 4 witnesses, medical evidence, financial trail. The trap was almost complete. Then Conrad called. 11:47 p.m. I answered on the first ring. Rowan knows, Conrad said without preamble, and he's breaking. My heart stopped. What happened? He was searching for insurance documents in his filing cabinet. Found a black leather notebook hidden in the back. Leora's operational notes. 3 years of documentation sterling. Every withdrawal with the fabricated justification beside it. Psychological manipulation tactics. There's a section where she notes that Rowan responds best to guilt about neglecting you, recommends using it repeatedly. Where is he now? Parked outside your estate in his car. Called me 20 minutes ago, says he stood in his office for 10 minutes just frozen, reading page after page. There's a section titled Plan B. I closed my eyes. What does it say? After your death stage car accident, to eliminate Rowan because he knows too much. Make it look like grief-induced reckless driving, timing within 6 months of your funeral. Method brake line failure on Mountain Road. The notebook had a title page, 3 words in Leora's precise handwriting, Project Garrison Closure. She documented her plan to murder my son, I said. In detail, dollar amounts, dates, manipulation tactics, everything. Sterling, he can't go back inside that house without her knowing something's wrong. He's terrified, guilty, angry. All of it is showing on his face, and he knows it. Put him on speakers, I said. I need to hear his voice. A moment of silence. Then, Dad. Rowan's voice was raw. He'd been crying. Rowan, listen to my voice. I'm clear-headed. I'm not confused. Everything she told you about my cognitive decline was manufactured. I've been investigating her for 9 days. The medication, the edited video, the forged signatures, all of it is documented. You're not crazy. I'm not crazy. We're both her targets. The notebook says I'm next, Rowan whispered. After you're gone, she stages my accident within 6 months. She wrote it like a business plan. Date ranges, success probabilities, backup methods if the brake line fails. Dad, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I'm so sorry I... Stop, I said firmly. We don't have time for apologies. We have time for strategy. Where's Leora right now? Inside. She thinks I'm working late at the office. Good. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go inside. You're going to kiss her goodnight. You're going to act like everything is normal. Tomorrow morning, you're going to wake up and be the devoted husband you've been for 3 years. Can you do that? How do I look at her knowing she planned to kill us both? The same way I've been looking at her for the past 10 days, while pretending my mind was falling apart. You perform. You think about every moment you suspected something was wrong and dismissed it. You channel that dismissal. You become the Rowan who trusted her completely, the one who believed his father was losing his mind. Conrad's voice cut in. Sterling, if she suspects, she accelerates, which means both of you die within 48 hours instead of according to her timeline. Rowan needs to go back inside that house and act like nothing happened, like he never found the notebook. I don't know if I can, Rowan said. You can, I said, because in 48 hours we spring the trap. We get her confession on live stream. We end this, but only if you can maintain the performance for 2 more days. Can you do that? A long pause. I heard him breathing, steadying himself. Yes, he said finally. Yes, I can do that. Go inside, kiss her goodnight. Tomorrow you play the devoted husband better than you ever have. Both our lives depend on it. Okay, Rowan said. Okay. I heard my son's car door close through the phone, then his footsteps on gravel, then the front door of his house, my house, opening, then silence as he went to bed next to his would-be murderer. Conrad stayed on the line. Sterling, this is... I know, I said. I've run operations in war zones with lower stakes. At least soldiers know who the enemy is when they wake up. We need to move up the timeline. If she senses anything from Rowan... 48 hours, I said. We have the medical evidence, the financial trail, Dr. Sinclair's confession, the employment records, and now the operational notebook. We just need her confession on record. 2 more days of performance, then we trigger the trap. If Rowan breaks... He won't, I said. He's my son. He knows what's at stake. After the call ended, I sat in my dark study processing the new reality. Rowan was now an active participant in the trap, but also Leora's second target. If she suspected, he knew she'd accelerate both murders. My son finally knows the truth. Now he must act better than ever. Both our lives depend on it. Through the study window, I could see a single light turn on in the guest house where Rowan and Leora sleep. It stayed on for 43 seconds. Then darkness. I didn't sleep that night. Conrad described every detail of that afternoon to me later with the precision of a man who understood that testimony requires exactness. At 3 o'clock, he walked into Milwaukee Police Department's fraud division carrying a leather portfolio that weighed exactly 8 pounds. I'd watched him pack it that morning via video call, the last secure connection Cosima had arranged before Leora could detect it. Detective Sarah Brennan took the meeting personally. She'd worked financial crimes for 17 years. She understood what numbers meant when they stopped making sense. I sat in my study phone on speaker listening to Conrad lay out the case. My former partner is Sterling Garrison, he said. Forensic auditor, 43 years with the Bureau. He's also my closest friend, and someone is currently stealing everything he owns while chemically dismantling his ability to stop them. $340,000 disappeared from his accounts over 6 months. The signatures are perfect, too perfect. Elder fraud is common, Brennan said. Does he have dementia? That's what his wife claims, but look at these. Paper rustled. Transaction logs he kept, pattern analysis, forensic annotations. This isn't someone losing cognitive function. This is someone documenting a crime in progress. Silence stretched for 11 seconds. Who does he think took the money? Brennan asked. His wife, Leora Garrison. But there's more. Conrad's voice steadied. Her previous 3 husbands died under circumstances ruled accidental, each one within 2 years of marriage, each one after significant asset transfers. More paper. Photos I knew, death certificates, marriage licenses, financial records spanning 2 decades. I'll need to verify this, Brennan said slowly. I have a forensic accountant standing by, and Detective Marcus Chen from Chicago PD. He investigated husband number 2's death in 2011. He's willing to testify that evidence was overlooked. Mr. Garrison, this is serious. If what you're saying is true, it's true, Conrad said. And it's happening again. Tonight, she's been increasing my father's medication without his knowledge. Nerve suppressants. She thinks he's too confused to notice, but he's noticed everything. Where is your father now? Home, with her, waiting. That's not safe. It's necessary. She needs to believe the trap worked. We need her confession. Brennan's chair creaked. We can't use coerced confessions. We're not coercing anything. We're documenting what she does when she thinks nobody's watching. Conrad paused. My father is wearing a live stream camera, audio and video. 247 witnesses are watching right now, mostly legal professionals I invited specifically as documented observers. Whatever happens tonight will have more corroboration than most criminal trials. The word she didn't finish was probably insane or brilliant or both. If she does what we think she'll do, Conrad continued, you'll have live footage of attempted murder plus whatever she says. My father will be protected. I have emergency services on standby and I'm tracking his location in real time, but she needs to show her hand. Another long silence. Where will this happen? Brennan finally asked. The wooden bridge on their property, 1/4 mile from the house. She's been suggesting evening walks there all week, testing his mobility, I think. That's where she'll make her move. How long do we have? She usually suggests the walk around 7. Sunsets at 7:43. I'd position units close, but concealed by 6:30. I heard Brennan exhale slowly. If this goes wrong, then my father dies tonight and she collects his life insurance and moves on to victim number 5, Conrad said flatly. We're past safe options, detective. We're down to the only option that stops her. The call ended at 3:47. At 4:15, my phone buzzed. Cosima's text live stream active. 247 viewers. Conrad briefed them legal observation only, no interference. You're live in 3, 2. I adjusted the lapel camera disguised as a tie pin. High-definition video directional audio 6-hour battery. Cosima had tested it 12 times. At 5:30, I found the nerve patches in the bathroom exactly where Leora always prepared my evening medication. 3 patches instead of 1. Triple dose. Enough to cause significant motor impairment, confusion, potential cardiac events in a man my age. I photographed them with my phone, sent the image to Conrad, then returned them precisely to position. At 6:45, Leora appeared in the study doorway wearing her concerned wife expression. Sterling, darling, you've been inside all day. Why don't we take a walk before dinner? The weather's lovely. I looked up from the blank notepad I'd been staring at for effect. Walk. Just to the bridge. The fresh air will help. Her smile was warm, practiced, perfect. I stood slowly, letting my hand shake as I gripped the desk. All right. She helped me into my jacket, the solicitous touch of someone who cared deeply. Or someone who needed me mobile enough to walk a 1/4 mile but impaired enough to fall. We moved through the garden as sunset painted everything gold and red. Beautiful evening for murder, I thought distantly. She'd chosen well. The wooden bridge crossed a shallow ravine, 30-foot drop to rocks and water below. Picturesque. Deadly if you fell wrong. We reached the center. She stopped, turned to face me. Sterling, she said softly, I want you to know I did care for you. In my way. That's when I knew. But some debts are older than affection, she continued. 20 years ago, your investigation sent my father to prison. He died there within months. You probably don't even remember his name, Richard Ashford, just another fraud case to you. But I was 16 years old, and you took everything. The entry twist landed like a blade between ribs. You destroyed my family with your perfect forensic analysis, she said. So I've been destroying you the same way. Perfectly, methodically, 3 practice runs. First, I needed to get the timing right. I stared at her, letting my expression show the confusion she expected. "Your medication tonight was special," she whispered. "You're going to feel very dizzy very soon, and when you fall, I'll be devastated, heartbroken, the grieving widow who tried so hard to care for her declining husband." I swayed slightly, let my eyes unfocus. "That's it," she murmured. "Just let go, Sterling. It's almost over." I looked directly into her eyes. She thought I was sinking into darkness. I said, clearly, every word transmitted directly to my son's ears and 247 legal witnesses. But I never took the patches. Her face changed. Behind us, car doors slammed. Detective Brennan's voice rang across the ravine. "Lyora Garrison, stay where you are, hands visible." The exit twist: she'd confessed to everything, 4 murders, 20 years of revenge, and she'd done it live. At 6 o'clock that evening, Conrad called with 2 words that changed the endgame: warrant signed. I sat in my study phone, pressed to my ear, watching December darkness settle over Lake Geneva through the window. Lyora was in the kitchen preparing dinner. I could hear her humming. "Detective Brennan reviewed everything," Conrad said. "Crypto wallets, Dr. Reyes' medical analysis, the 3 previous victims' signature forensics. She called it the most complete fraud case she's seen in 20 years. Detective Sarah Brennan, Walworth County Sheriff's Office, Financial Crimes Division, 17-year veteran who'd built her reputation on cases nobody else wanted to touch. The kind of investigator who understood that numbers told stories when people lied." But I asked because there was always a but. "But without recorded confession, defense counsel can dismantle circumstantial evidence. We need her admitting intent, spoken on record." The entry twist settled into my chest like ice water. 11 days of investigation, thousands of dollars in forensic analysis, 3 linked murder cases, and it all hinged on whether Lyora would confess to a man she believed was losing his mind. "The live stream is ready," I asked. Cosima confirmed. 247 viewers, queued forensic accountants, attorneys, 2 federal investigators. The moment you activate, they all witness simultaneously. I looked at the wheelchair beside my desk. Cosima had installed the activation switch in the left armrest 3 days ago. One press, and everything I heard would transmit to 247 legal professionals who'd been briefed to observe, only never interfere. "Sterling, if she doesn't confess tonight." "She will," I said. "Psychopaths need to gloat. I'm counting on it." The line went quiet for 3 seconds. "I'll be in position by 8, Conrad finally said. "Rowan's with me. We'll be monitoring from the car." After he hung up, I sat in the darkening study and tried to steady my breathing. I'd spent 11 days preparing for this moment. She'd spent 20 years. The difference was, I knew she was coming. At 8:15, Lyora appeared in the study doorway wearing her concerned wife expression. "Sterling, darling, you've been inside all day. Why don't we take a walk? The bridge has such beautiful reflections at night." I looked up slowly, letting confusion cloud my features. "Bridge. The footbridge by the lake. Just you and me. The fresh air will help you sleep." She helped me into the wheelchair with gentle hands. Solicitous. Caring. The performance was flawless. We moved through the December night. Cold air bit at my face. The wheelchair's wheels crunched over gravel paths. When we were 50 yards from the house, I pressed the switch hidden in the armrest. One soft click. 247 people just started listening. She had no idea. The wooden footbridge stretched over a narrow inlet where Lake Geneva met frozen shoreline. No estate cameras reached this far. No witnesses except water and stars. She'd chosen carefully. Lyora stopped the wheelchair at the bridge's center, produced a syringe from her coat pocket. "This is 3 times your normal dose," she said softly, gripping my wrist. "In 2 minutes you won't remember your own name, but I need you to hear this first." The needle pierced skin. Cold flooded my veins. "You destroyed my family in 2004. She continued, voice steady. "Your investigation sent my father to prison. He died there 6 months after sentencing. I was 16 years old, standing in that lobby watching you take him away." She knelt beside the wheelchair so her face was level with mine. "I've spent 20 years planning this. You and the 3 before you and Rowan after." My vision began to blur at the edges. The sedative was working faster than I'd expected. "The beautiful part..." Lyora's smile was radiant. "Rowan will never suspect. Grief makes people so trusting. After your accident tonight, I'll comfort him. Then in 6 months, his car goes off a bridge too. Investigator's daughter gets perfect closure." She stood checking her watch. "You were always so careful, so precise, but you never saw me coming. That's the difference between investigation and revenge. I had 20 years. You had 11 days. Darkness pulled at my consciousness. I let my head loll forward, eyes half closed. "I've already transferred the last funds," she continued, speaking to what she believed was an unconscious man. $412,000 total across 3 accounts. Lisbon flight books tomorrow, under my real name, Lyora Kessler. The accounts are offshore, untraceable, structured through 3 jurisdictions. By the time anyone questions your death, I'll be drinking port wine on a terrace overlooking the Atlantic. 50 yards away into the darkness, I knew Rowan sat in Conrad's car with a laptop open, hearing his wife admit planning both our murders. Every word captured, every confession recorded. 247 witnesses listening. Leora began wheeling me toward the bridge edge where wooden rails met empty air. You know what I remember most. Her voice was dreamy now. Sitting in that courtroom watching you testify. You were so calm, so certain. You destroyed my father with numbers and logic and perfect analysis. I decided that day I'd destroy you the same way. Perfectly, methodically, no mistakes. The wheelchair stopped 3 feet from the rail. Goodbye, Sterling. This is for my father. Through dimming vision, I saw her grip the wheelchair handles, saw her prepare to push, saw her check once more that we were alone. She thought I was sinking into darkness, but every word transmitted directly to my son's ears. Headlights flared in the night, 3 sheriff's vehicles blocking the path behind us. Detective Brennan's voice cut through cold air. Leora Ashford, stop where you are, hands visible. Leora spun around face blank with shock. Step away from the wheelchair. Brennan continued advancing with 2 deputies. You're under arrest for attempted murder, elder fraud, and conspiracy. We have your full confession on record. I watched through half-closed eyes as Leora's expression transformed from shock to calculation to cold rage. He set me up, she whispered, staring down at me. You were lucid the whole time. I let my eyes focus fully on hers. 20 years, I said quietly. But you confessed in 11 minutes. The last thing I saw before the sedative pulled me under was Detective Brennan stepping forward with handcuffs and 50 yards away, Conrad's car door opening as my son began running toward us. The last thing I saw clearly before the sedative pulled me under was my son running toward me, shouting his wife's name like a wounded animal. When awareness flickered back seconds or minutes later, I couldn't tell Rowan stood between me and Leora, blocking her path like a wall. Leora, he said, stop. She turned toward him and I watched the moment register, his presence, his position, the look on his face. You were listening, she whispered. The whole time. Every word? Rowan's voice broke on the second syllable. 3 murders, planning mine. All of it. The entry twist landed visibly across her features, composed predator mask shattering into something raw and desperate. She stepped backward toward the lake edge, frozen water gleaming in patrol car headlights. You don't understand what he did to my family, she started. I understand you planned to kill my father, and then me, Rowan interrupted. That's all I need to understand. Detective Brennan advanced with 2 deputies' weapons drawn but lowered. Leora Ashford, hands where I can see them. Step away from the edge. For 3 seconds, I thought she might jump. Run into freezing water rather than face what came next. But she turned slowly, raised her hands, and let Brennan approach. Leora Ashford, you're under arrest for attempted murder, elder fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, identity theft, wire fraud, falsifying medical records, and obstruction of justice. 7 charges. I counted them through dimming consciousness, each one a nail in the coffin of her 20-year plan. Behind us, radio chatter crackled. Officers were already inside the estate. Conrad appeared at my wheelchair phone pressed to his ear. Dr. Sinclair tried to run through the garden, made it 12 feet before deputies tackled him. They found him shredding documents in your study, falsified cognitive assessments, backdated neurological evaluations, the whole paper trail. My vision doubled, then steadied. The sedative was fighting my attempts at awareness. Second accomplice caught in the garage. Conrad continued, listening to updates. Loading suitcases, $180,000 in cash, 3 fake passports with Leora's photo, different names, different hair colors, crypto wallet hardware containing the rest. Rowan hadn't moved. He stood frozen, watching police place handcuffs on his wife. Leora met his eyes once. I did love you, she said softly. That part was real. Was it? Rowan's voice was hollow. Or was I just collateral damage on the way to killing my father? She didn't answer. Detective Brennan guided her toward the waiting patrol car. The bridge, the lake, the December stars, everything began telescoping away from me. I felt Conrad's hand on my shoulder. Ambulance is here, he said. Stay with us, Sterling. I tried to nod, but darkness was winning. Later, much later, Conrad would tell me what happened in the 30 minutes after I lost consciousness. Police swept through the Garrison estate like archaeologists excavating a crime scene. Dr. Sinclair arrested in the study, still clutching shredded paper. The accomplice, a woman named Rebecca Drummond, who'd worked with Leora on 2 previous murders, caught with evidence of the entire escape plan. But the discovery that changed everything came from the master bedroom safe. A leather-bound journal, personal diary kept since Leora was 16. First page, dated October 2004, the day Sterling Garrison destroyed my family. Final entry dated yesterday. Tomorrow I will end this. 20 years of entries. Not just hatred and revenge planning, but loneliness. Fear. Nights crying alone in apartments across 3 states. Most human moment in the entire investigation, the villain becoming visible as a broken person. Conrad read me excerpts 3 days later, voice careful. Entry from 2011. I see him everywhere, in every elderly man who smiles at me in coffee shops. I hate that I can't stop the anger. She was 23 years old. Detective Brennan had been blunt when she reviewed it. This doesn't change the charges, but it explains the obsession. 20 years is a long time to carry that much pain. Conrad's summary was quieter. The irony. Her father was guilty. Your investigation was clean, your testimony accurate. She spent 2 decades destroying innocent people for legitimate justice. A conspiracy is like a house of cards. It stands perfectly until one witness speaks. Then everything collapses in 90 seconds. Liora's collapsed in 7 charges, 3 arrests, and evidence so overwhelming that her defense attorney would later advise immediate plea negotiation. But I didn't learn any of this until days afterward. What I remember clearly is waking in Walworth County Hospital emergency room with fluorescent lights burning my eyes and Dr. Hugh Reyes checking my pulse. Vitals are stable, he said. Sedative dose was significant, but you're a large man and intervention was rapid. You'll have residual drowsiness for 18 hours, but you survived, Mr. Garrison. Where's my son? My voice came out hoarse. I'm here, Dad. Rowan sat in the chair beside my bed, eyes red from crying or exhaustion, or both. First time in 8 months we'd been alone together without Leora's presence between us like a wall. I'm not going anywhere, he added quietly. The recording held. All 247 witnesses. Conrad sending it to the DA first thing tomorrow morning. I tried to sit up, failed, let my head fall back against the pillow. I'm sorry you had to hear her say those things, I whispered. Rowan's hand found mine, gripped tight. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. We didn't talk much after that. I drifted in and out of sedative fog while monitors beeped and nurses checked vitals every hour. But Rowan stayed in that chair through the entire night, hand wrapped around mine. My son didn't say anything, but his hand didn't let go of mine all night. When dawn light filled the hospital room, Conrad arrived carrying a morning newspaper. He held it up so I could read the headline. Forensic auditor exposes elder fraud ring live stream confession goes viral. The story was no longer just ours. 247 witnesses had become 2 million overnight. When Rowan finally spoke 12 hours after holding my hand through the night, his first words were, I need to tell you every time I chose her over you. Morning light filled the hospital room. Nurses had checked vitals at 7 left breakfast tray untouched on the rolling table. Rowan sat in the same chair he'd occupied since the ambulance brought me here, eyes red-rimmed and hollow. You don't have to, I started. Yes, he interrupted quietly. I do. He pulled the chair closer to the bed, leaned forward with elbows on knees like a penitent at confession. The medication change in November. You asked me to verify the prescription with Dr. Reyes. I told you to trust Leora's medical knowledge instead of checking myself. That was the first betrayal. The entry twist registered in his posture. He'd spent the night cataloging his failures, judging his own complicity before I could. When you couldn't find your bank statements in October, I accused you of misplacing them during confusion episodes. I chose the easy explanation, the one that made my wife innocent and you failing. I listened without interrupting. This wasn't a conversation. This was confession, and it needed to happen completely. 3 times you tried to tell me something was wrong. 3 times I made you feel crazy for suggesting it. His voice cracked. I was her accomplice even if I didn't know it. Every time I defended her judgment over yours, I helped her steal from you, poison you, plan your murder. He stopped, swallowed hard. In September, you showed me the signature analysis, the pressure points that didn't match your natural writing. I looked at it for 30 seconds and said you were imagining patterns that weren't there. But you weren't imagining anything. You were right, and I called you paranoid. The hospital room felt very small suddenly. Rowan continued. The wheelchair incident last month, when you said Leora had adjusted the brake tension without asking. I told you that you probably changed it yourself and forgotten, made you doubt your own memory. That's what she needed me to do, and I did it perfectly. He looked up, met my eyes. I chose her over you, not once, systematically, for 8 months. And when you tried to protect yourself by documenting everything in that diary, I thought you were declining. I pitied you. Silence settled between us. Outside the window, Lake Geneva stretched gray and still under December clouds. I watched my son's bent shoulders and remembered a different version of him. 8 years old, following me to the forensic accounting office on Saturday mornings, asking endless questions about ledgers and evidence chains. That boy believed his father could solve anything, believed numbers told truth when people lied. Somewhere between 8 and 39, I'd lost his trust, or failed to maintain it strongly enough to withstand someone who'd spent 20 years perfecting the art of manipulation. "You used to ask me why numbers mattered more than stories," I said quietly. "I told you numbers don't lie, but people do. You were 8. Rowan's breath hitched. "When did you stop believing I could read the evidence correctly?" I asked. "When someone I loved told me you couldn't anymore." The answer hung in the air between us like smoke. I looked at my son and saw two people simultaneously, the 8-year-old who trusted me completely and the 39-year-old who'd had to choose between believing his wife or his father. He'd chosen wrong, but I understood why. Leora had been a professional, 20 years of practice, 3 successful kills before attempting mine. She'd studied how to dismantle elderly credibility, how to position herself as the compassionate caregiver, how to make family members complicit in their own parents' destruction. Rowan was victim number 7 in her pattern. He just happened to survive. I considered my options carefully. Hold resentment that would poison whatever years remained, or offer forgiveness that acknowledged hurt without being consumed by it. Rowan was the only family I had left. My wife, Margaret, died 4 years ago. No siblings, no extended relatives. The choice was binary: rebuild relationship with my damaged son, or spend my final decade alone with vindication as my only companion. I chose rebuilding, but I refused to pretend the damage didn't exist. "I forgive you, Rowan," I said. "Not because you're blameless, because holding on to this will destroy what's left of us." His head came up sharply. "How can you forgive this?" "Because you're my son, and because she was a professional predator who fooled 7 people before you. You weren't uniquely weak. You were uniquely targeted." Tears tracked down his face. "But I can't pretend it didn't happen," I continued. "The trust we had before, that's gone. We'll have to build something new, different, maybe smaller, but real." "What does that mean?" he whispered. "It means I won't weaponize the past in arguments, won't remind you daily of your failure. We'll work toward a functional relationship." I paused, choosing words carefully. "But some things are permanently altered. Spontaneous trust, assumption of loyalty, certainty that you'll choose my welfare first when it conflicts with something you want." And Rowan flinched but didn't look away. "We'll live with permanent scars," I said. "Not a fairy tale resolution, just truth." "What if I can't forgive myself?" "Then you work on it, probably for years. That's your burden to carry, not mine to solve." I reached for his hand. He took it. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," I said quietly. "It means you decide not to let the past control the future, but the past still happened. We'll both remember that." "So what now?" "Now you're my son. That doesn't change. But who we are to each other now, that's something we'll have to discover together." Rowan nodded slowly, wiping his face with his free hand. An hour later, as he helped me into the wheelchair for discharge, his phone rang. He checked the screen, then answered on speaker. "Mr. Garrison, this is Detective Brennan. We need you to identify something. We found additional victims. The pattern goes back further than we thought." 2 weeks after the arrest, Marcus Whitmore called with the words every fraud victim wants to hear: "The asset freeze is permanent. Every dollar is protected." I sat in his Lake Geneva law office with Rowan and Conrad, watching Marcus spread financial documents across the mahogany conference table like evidence in a trial, which I suppose they had been. "Every withdrawal, every transfer, every fraudulent signature reversed," Marcus continued. "The court ruled the entire 3-year scheme void ab initio, from the beginning." Rowan leaned forward. "All of it. $17.3 million recovered from 11 victims across 3 states. Your father's portion was the largest single target she'd focused her final effort here." Marcus slid a document toward me. "Bank accounts restored with enhanced protection protocols. Court appointed a forensic monitor to oversee transactions for 6 months as precaution." Conrad pulled up his laptop. "The crypto wallets added another surprise: $340,000 in digital assets we didn't expect." She'd been converting cash in stages, building untraceable reserves for the flight to Lisbon. The entry twist settled warm in my chest, not just recovery, but vindication. Every system I'd trusted for 43 years had worked exactly as designed once I'd gathered the right evidence. "And the house?" I asked. "Remains yours," Marcus said. "She had no legal claim despite the marriage. Your prenup held perfectly, she gets nothing." Rowan exhaled slowly. "So it's really over." "The financial part," Marcus corrected. "The legal proceedings are just beginning." The arraignment happened 3 weeks later in Walworth County Courthouse. January cold made the marble floors feel like ice. I sat in the gallery with Rowan, watching Leora enter in orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. No silk blouses, no carefully styled hair, no composed mask of concerned wife. Just an exhausted woman who'd spent 20 years on revenge that failed in 11 days. The judge read charges methodically. Ms. Ashford, you are charged with 7 felony counts including attempted murder, elder fraud, conspiracy, falsifying medical records, identity theft, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. How do you plead? Not guilty. Her voice was flat, empty, just procedure. Dr. Sinclair stood beside her in matching orange, charged with conspiracy and fraudulent medical practice, his medical license already suspended pending trial. A third defendant, Rebecca Drummond, the accomplice caught in the garage, faced federal money laundering charges. She'd already accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony. Detective Brennan found us in the hallway afterward. Federal prosecutors are building a multi-state case, she said quietly. The pattern spans Illinois and Iowa too. We found 2 more victims who didn't report because they thought they were losing their minds. She'll face charges in 3 jurisdictions. How long? Rowan asked. If convicted on all counts, 40 to 60 years. She's 36. She'll die in prison. We walked to the parking lot in silence. Halfway to the car, Rowan stopped. She looks so small now, he said. She always was, I replied. We just couldn't see it under the performance. Watching her in that courtroom, I finally understood predators only look dangerous when they're hunting. Once caged, they're just people who made terrible choices. 2 weeks later, Rowan and I stood in the Garrison Estate living room surrounded by moving boxes. We could renovate, he suggested. Change it completely. New furniture, different colors, make it ours instead of hers. I looked through the glass walls at Lake Geneva ice beginning to thaw in late January sun. Or we could build new memories somewhere that doesn't require erasing old ones first, I said. Rowan nodded slowly. You want to sell? This house was supposed to be my retirement dream. Instead, it became a crime scene. I don't want to spend my last decade in a museum of trauma. Where will you go? Smaller place. Galena, maybe. Somewhere I can see neighbors without needing binoculars. I paused. What about you? I need to figure that out, he said quietly. Maybe Milwaukee. Close enough to visit, far enough to think clearly. We didn't discuss living together. That assumption that we'd naturally share space belonged to a relationship that no longer existed. We were rebuilding something different now. Moving day came fast. Professional packers handled everything with efficient detachment. I stood at the glass door overlooking the lake one final time while Rowan supervised the truck loading. The wooden bridge was visible in the distance, the place where Leora's confession transmitted to 247 witnesses, where everything ended and began simultaneously. Rowan appeared beside me, hands in pockets. Dad, do you regret anything about how you handled this? I considered the question carefully. I regret not teaching you earlier what I learned in 30 years of fraud investigation, I said finally. Rowan waited. Those who care for us don't always love us, I continued. Leora cared for you, made meals, managed schedules, showed attention, but she didn't love you. She was performing care to get what she wanted. How do you tell the difference? The exit twist crystallized into hard-won wisdom. Love doesn't require you to doubt yourself. Real care doesn't make you feel crazy for trusting your own perceptions. When someone's affection only works if you stop believing your own mind, that's not love. That's control dressed up as compassion. Rowan absorbed this silently. The hardest lesson, I added quietly, is that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who looked like they cared the most. She was good at it, Rowan whispered. 20 years of practice. The movers called from the truck, everything loaded, ready to go. I took one last look at Lake Geneva through the floor-to-ceiling glass. I'd arrived in November. Ice forming, darkness settling early, the villa feeling like a fortress against winter. Now late January thaw was beginning, days lengthening by minutes each week. Same lake, different season. Same man, different understanding. Lake Geneva looked very different in the spring. As the moving truck pulled away from the glass villa, my phone buzzed. Email from Detective Brennan. Subject line: Witness protection. Contact Kenneth Thorne wants to meet you. The survivor who'd escaped Leora's scheme 5 years ago in 2019, one of the financial victims who never came forward, too afraid he wouldn't be believed. He'd been watching the news coverage. He finally had proof he wasn't imagining things. The one who got away. He had a story I needed to hear. The moving truck arrived in Galena on a January morning so cold the Mississippi River looked like frosted glass. I stood on the porch watching movers unload furniture, breath fogging in air that burned my lungs. Rowan directed traffic toward the 2-bedroom craftsman that cost less than a single month at the Lake Geneva estate. Kitchen needs complete remodel, he said, surveying dated cabinets and cracked linoleum. Bathroom too. You sure about this? I'm sure about starting somewhere that isn't haunted. I'd chosen Galena deliberately. Came here 25 years ago, chasing a paper trail through municipal fraud, spent 3 days walking tree-lined streets that felt human scale instead of architectural monument. The entry twist crystallized as I watched Rowan carry boxes. This town represented full circle return to my investigator identity, reclaiming the professional past Lyora tried to erase. I came here in 1999, I told Rowan. Never thought I'd end up living here. Sometimes investigations lead you home, he said quietly. Rowan insisted on doing renovations himself, refusing contractors. No caregiver this time, he said firmly. I'll do it. You have a company to run. I have a father to take care of. Everything else is negotiable. Months passed. Not movie montage where everything heals cleanly, but real time with real struggle. Rowan renovated weekends, tearing out cabinets, installing fixtures, painting walls we chose together. Weekdays he managed his company remotely. Mornings he helped me organize medication. Some days I forgot street names. Asked him 3 times where the pharmacy was. Commerce Street, he'd answer patiently. Same as yesterday, Dad. Right, I knew that. Some days he was exhausted and short-tempered, burned dinner snapped at minor things. I don't know how she made this look so easy, he muttered one March evening, scraping charred chicken into the trash. She had practice, I said quietly, and different motives. Not perfect, not picturesque, but real. No one was acting anymore. Perfect healing is fiction. Real recovery looks like this, some good days, some bad days, and 2 people choosing to show up for each other anyway. The network that saved me scattered but stayed intact. Estella retired in February with a substantial thank you payment I insisted she accept. Bought a cottage near Lake Geneva, sent photos of her garden. Mr. Garrison, this is too much money, she protested on the phone. You saved my life. There's no amount that's too much for that. Nora sent a letter in March. Handwritten apology for believing Leora's narrative about my declining cognition. I replied briefly. She fooled 7 people before you. Professional predators are professionals for a reason. Don't blame yourself. Conrad accepted my invitation to visit Galena in summer. I'll bring the case files, he said during our April call. Thought you might want them for that memoir you mentioned. No code this time, I told him. Real names, real story. By October, the house felt lived in instead of occupied. Rowan's renovation work showed in updated kitchen, refinished floors, fresh paint. My contribution was smaller organizing books, arranging furniture, making coffee on mornings when my hands cooperated. And writing. I sat on the veranda one late autumn afternoon, yellow legal pad balanced on my lap pen, moving slowly across lined paper. Not coded diary this time. Public testimony under my real name. The memoir opened simply. In 30 years of forensic investigation, I documented hundreds of frauds. This memoir is about the one that targeted me and what I learned when the investigator became the victim. My medication affected short-term memory more each month. I'd forget conversations from morning by evening, lose track of days, ask Rowan the same questions repeatedly. But muscle memory for writing remained. My hand knew how to form letters, construct sentences, tell truth. So I wrote while I could. The Mississippi River stretched below the veranda water, reflecting copper light as afternoon aged toward evening. Trees along the far bank showed autumn colors, red gold rust. Rowan stepped onto the veranda, coffee mug in hand. Stood behind my chair, reading over my shoulder. You're really naming her full name, full story. Truth is the best revenge, and the only closure that lasts. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. The morning newspaper lay on the porch table section, scattered from earlier reading. Small article on page 6 caught my attention. Lyora Ashford sentenced to 25 years in multi-state elder fraud case. 25 years. She was 36. She'd be 61 when released if she survived prison that long. I showed the article to Rowan. He read it silently, then his eyes tracked to the advertisement directly beside it. Glossy, full-color ad. Compassionate Senior Care Services. Your loved one deserves the best. Stock photo showed smiling caregiver helping elderly man with puzzle. We both stared at the page for 3 seconds. Then we laughed. Dark laughter, exhausted laughter, but real. The exit twist crystallized in newsprint irony, her sentence printed beside the very industry she'd weaponized, the compassion she'd performed while plotting murder. You couldn't write better irony if you tried, Rowan said. I picked up my pen, turned to a fresh page in the legal pad, wrote the memoir's final line in careful longhand. My illness will take many things, but no one can take this. I lived long enough to see truth win and told it with my own hands. The sun began setting over the Mississippi, turning the water copper and gold. Temperature dropped as light faded. Rowan's hand remained on my shoulder as darkness came slowly across the river. Tomorrow I might not remember writing these words. The medication would continue eroding short-term memory, making each day slightly hazier than the last. Eventually I'd forget larger things, faces, names, entire years. But the memoir would remember for me. Truth documented in permanent ink testimony that would outlast both my memory and Lyora's revenge. She'd spent 20 years destroying people. I'd spent 11 days stopping her. In the end, the investigators' tools won: documentation, evidence, pattern recognition, and willingness to trust what numbers showed, even when everyone said I was imagining things. Rowan squeezed my shoulder gently. "Come inside, Dad. It's getting cold." "In a minute. I want to watch the sunset finish." He went inside, left the door open so warmth spilled onto the veranda. I sat with my legal pad and pen, watching light fade over water-breathing cold air that smelled like river and autumn leaves. This wasn't the retirement I'd planned, but it was real, earned, mine, and no one could take that away. And to you listening to my story, remember this: the people closest to you aren't always the ones who care about you most. I spent 43 years investigating fraud, but I never imagined I'd become the victim. My mistake was assuming that professional expertise would protect me from personal betrayal. I trusted the wrong person because she performed care so convincingly. Don't make my mistake. Trust your instincts, even when family tells you you're wrong. Family betrayal revenge stories like this one teach us that documentation saves lives. The hardest lesson I learned is that care and love are different. Someone can appear devoted while destroying you. When you're being gaslit, write everything down. Keep records. Trust the numbers. They don't lie, even when people do. I believe God allowed me to survive this family betrayal revenge for a reason: to warn others. If you're reading family Reddit stories like mine and recognizing patterns in your own life, that's not coincidence. Listen to that warning. People who truly love you never require you to doubt yourself. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you experienced family betrayal revenge in your own life? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else. If this resonated with you, please share it. And if you enjoy family Reddit stories like this, subscribe to Dad's Silent Revenge for more true accounts of quiet justice. Thank you for staying until the very end. Final note: certain details have been fictionalized for storytelling and to emphasize the lesson. Any resemblance to specific people or events is coincidental. What matters is the message: trust yourself, document everything, and remember that real love never makes you doubt your own mind.